The most embarrassing alert ever while somebody else was holding my phone. Okay, this one happened to my friend who we'll call Bob. Bob, some friends and I went out one night to watch a show in town. Afterwards, we decided to go buy some drinks and decided to carpool together. Bob's phone was dying, so he asked if he could charge it on the way over with the car charger. While it was charging, it had apparently connected to the car's speaker system, and without warning, the car read a new text message out loud to all of our collective surprise. "Hey baby, it's been a long time since you finished in my mouth. How about we hook up tonight so I can taste that sweet juice again?" Needless to say, he was mortified, and the rest of us rolled with laughter on our way to the bar. Chatting to a guy in a bar, handed him my phone so that he could type his number in. At that moment, a message pops up from my friend sitting several tables away saying, "Go rock his world." While my friend was using my phone, my mum saw fit to text me, "Remember not to boink Thomas, he has chlamydia." I appreciated that she treated this so simply as if you just remembered to lock the door or buy milk. You might accidentally have boinked Thomas all of a sudden. Whoops. New job alert from ZipRecruiter while I was at work. Ooh. Yeah, I got a call to set up a job interview while I was in the car with my manager who'd applied for the same job. Awkward. I got the job though. Years ago, I was working at an Apple store as a genius, or technician, and I was helping an older woman with her phone. This woman had to have been in her late 60s or early 70s, as sweet as could be, and was having some minor issues with her phone. I think it was battery life or something. So she hands me her phone, and just as she does, a message pops up with a picture of a toilet full of doo-dee, and the message reads, "How many times do I have to tell you to flush the frickin' toilet?" Not knowing really what to do, I just hand it back to her and tell her she has a message. She takes the phone, half smiles, closes the message and hands it back saying, "Sorry about that, sweetheart. My daughter can be a bit of a B-word." Well, what kind of monster leaves that in the toilet? I'm going to assume that the daughter might be messing with her mum, perhaps while sitting outside the store at the mall. I know that I definitely would have done this to my friends in my younger days, maybe even my family, little turd that I was. This one happened to my friend. I sent him a text of a wet cat and said, "Look at this wet..." Well, you all know what word I said. Unfortunately, this was while my other friend's mum was holding his phone. She just awkwardly gave him his phone back. Well, I was the one doing the sending. I moved to Japan a couple of years ago, and early one morning, I was at the market and I saw a tanuki statue that had the full meat and potatoes on display. I took a picture of it and thought it would be funny to send my brother a message reading, "Unsolicited D-pic," and then send a pic of the tanuki statue. Little did I know, halfway around the world, my brother was doing some late evening car shopping. He'd recently been in an accident that had totaled his car and was in the market for a new one. He'd just handed the car salesman his phone so that he could show the guy the pics of the damage to his car, and the guy was looking through them when the words, "Unsolicited D-pic" popped up on the screen. My brother said the guy nearly dropped the phone trying to shove it back into his hands. Well, I think the brother could have gotten extra points for telling the salesman that it was just a brother sent him in a picture of his junk. And cue the banjo music. I was showing my aunt a picture when a text saying, "I would F the crap out of Machine Gun Kelly," appeared on my screen. We both pretended we didn't see it and quickly started talking about something else. Picture of my girlfriend's chest, while my mum was holding the phone. The other way around, I was holding my ex-husband's phone while he was driving me and the kids to the airport. Text comes in from a work colleague asking if we'd left yet. It was then that I realized the marriage was over. Oh, that sucks. I find that if I don't get into any extramarital business, I don't have to worry about my wife holding my phone. It makes things quite a bit easier. Left my phone on the kitchen table and went to pee. My parents were making dinner, and my mum saw the "want to F" notification from my boyfriend pop up. I was confused when I came back into the kitchen and my parents were laughing. Thanks, iPhone. A couple of years ago, I met a guy from Tinder in a pub for our first date. Things were going well, we were having a laugh and flirting. After about an hour, I took out my phone to show him a funny meme, and up popped a notification from my new period tracking app saying, "Today's the day, you're ovulating." I swiped it real quick, and I don't think he got a good look at it, but I was still worried he'd think I was some child-obsessed weirdo who timed my dates so that random Tinder guys could impregnate me. I turned off ovulation notifications after that. And I was the sender once when I texted my friend who was planning to break up with her boyfriend, "Hope you're okay. How did Gary take the breakup?" while Gary was using her phone and hadn't yet been broken up with. "Sorry, Gary. How did Gary take that?" Very badly, apparently. They'd been together for 10 years and he was completely blindsided. He was a very self-centered person, so the fact that his relationship was in tatters, like they hadn't slept together for 2 years at this point, and that his girlfriend was deeply unhappy had just apparently passed him by up until my message. Well, it had to be the time that I sent my best girlfriend, "You're right, future husband's dad is weird, and a little bit racist," and her future husband saw that text. Luckily, he laughed and agreed with me, but I was so embarrassed that he saw it. I had a bit of a saga with Border Patrol for a reason relevant here. My name is Imrad Rashid. Crossing into the state post-September 11th has had its moments, let's say. Also, with my background come the typical jokes close friends will make when I go to the US. But this time, crossing, I'd signed up with a company that pairs people willing to drive with people who need their vehicles somewhere that they don't want to drive to themselves, like snowbirds who go between Canada and Florida or Arizona and California and stuff. It was my first time working for them, and I was going to pick up a car in Florida and drive it to northern Ontario. I was flying down to Florida, and in the Toronto airport, there was an American customs which clears you before leaving rather than when you arrive. The thing about it was, I didn't have as much information as I would like to have had. I didn't know the name of the person whose vehicle it was, I didn't have the address of where I was picking it up, I had email correspondence with the business owner, but he was a little behind on providing the relevant paperwork. So in this case, from a border officer's perspective, I do kind of understand the rigmarole that followed, because you had a single mail with a one-way ticket to Florida and a not-so-substantiated story about how I was going to not stay indefinitely in the States. I was directed to secondary inspection, which was a place by that point I was pretty familiar with. Except this time I didn't notice the signs about not using electronics while in there, because I was too busy staring at my phone. The secondary inspection area was just a room with a lot of empty seats and nobody else. I waited for like 10 to 15 minutes playing around on my phone when the door I'd entered opened, and an officer who was probably preoccupied with something else passed through, noticed me on my phone and was like, "Hey, you can't be on that, give it here." So, off goes my phone with the officer as they exit to another room. So, Border Patrol had my phone when, unbeknownst to me, my buddy sent me a text in which he jokingly said something along the lines of, "Well, what makes you think they'll let you in this time?" Actually, I think my friend's text was in response to me sending out a general message to people that I was heading down to the US. A seemingly long time goes by, and another officer comes back with my phone, and my relatively congenial question period begins, where I have to explain, amongst other things, what the hell I'm doing in the States and how it works, why I might not get let into the States, as per my friend's text, which he must have sent while I didn't have my phone, and a joke concept that I'd saved in my notes app about smoking Mary J. But after all that, I did get let through. Arguably, coming back with someone else's vehicle across the border was a worse experience. I mean, the timing on the other stories is, "Oh no, my date or mum saw something humorous and weird," apart from that one guy who realized his relationship was ending. But this could legitimately have got you detained if you'd had a particularly heavy-handed officer. So count your lucky stars you got through. My sister-in-law was staying with me for a week, which I wasn't stoked about. My sister knew about that and messaged me, "How are you dealing with," her sister-in-law's name, "Do you need to pretend to have a nap again? Lol." Unfortunately, my sister-in-law was borrowing my tablet at the time and saw the notification pop up. She hasn't stayed with us since. Task failed successfully. When I got the notification, potential contact with a corona-positive person at the worst possible moment. I was ordering food off of DoorDash on my ex's phone when she got a text from a guy saying he couldn't wait to see her that weekend. She told me she was going to see her mum. My mum was looking up stuff on my prescription app on my phone when a message came in from a group chat that I'm on, a group chat named Pornographic Material, obviously edited for YouTube. I turned Instagram notifications off after that. No, the chat wasn't full of prawn, it was memes with some of my edgier friends. My friend had made this fake account on Twitter and followed me exactly at the time my teacher had taken my phone away. The notification read, "@buttpumper6969 has followed you." I'm surprised there aren't more teacher stories. For me, this was easily my most mortifying one. I had this roommate my sophomore year of college, and we had a very weird, close personal relationship. I was in my Spanish professor's office hours and she was waiting for me at the cafeteria to get lunch together. Just before going in, I texted her and asked her to get me some fries, and then I turned off my phone. I was showing my professor my paper on my laptop screen, very much forgetting that I had iMessages set up on my laptop. I'll never forget the look on his face when a notification came from my roommate with her saying, jokingly, "I'll get you fries, but only if you sensually feed them to me while you call me daddy." Suffice it to say, that was my last time visiting his office hours. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My friend sent a poop picture while my girlfriend was checking the weather for one of us one morning. Unsolicited poop pic. A friend of mine sent me a message for the first time in 4 months that was just ILY right as my girlfriend held the phone. I was showing my grandma some pictures. She chuckled a bit and quickly handed me back my phone. I looked at it and saw that my boyfriend, now husband, had texted me saying, "I hate it when I'm pooping and my ding-dong touches the water. Big schlong problems, you know?" We laughed about it, but my husband is still horrified at the thought of my grandma knowing about his big schlong problems. When I was in high school, my friends and I had the habit of giving each other funny contact names on our phones based on jokes we came up with. To this day, my high school's friends' contact names are things such as River B-Word, Jeff the Working Girl, Baby America, Sugar Mama, things like that. When we were juniors, a girl who was obsessed with my friend led to his contact name becoming Booty Lord, with some rather suggestive emojis following it. Everything was fine and dandy until a few months later when I'd forgotten about it. I was applying for a leadership position in a club I was a member of and was required to get 2 letters of recommendation for. For the second letter, I asked one of my teachers, who happened to be a very conservative man in his late 70s, if he could write one for me. Being the lazy son of a bee that he was, he told me to write the letter myself, saying all of the things I wanted him to say, and that he'd just sign that. After I finished typing up the letter, I handed him my phone to let him read and approve it before I printed it out. About 45 seconds after I gave him my phone, he very loudly and incredulously said, "Booty Lord?" and gave me a horrified look and shoved the phone back into my hands. That one was hard to explain. My boyfriend and I send each other random crap during the day like, "FedEx me that pecker," or "Flap that rack my way." I was showing my mum something on my phone once, and he sends, "Gonna slap you with my eggplant tonight." Imagine my conservative 15-year-old little brother's face when my boyfriend texted, "I'll destroy you down there," while we were watching some stupid goat on YouTube. "I'm gonna F your A so hard tonight, love." Love heart. I'm sorry for you having to see that, mother. Not exactly a bad message, but I lent my jacket to my crush and it had my phone in its pocket. Somebody sent me a message, so he got it out to give me, but unfortunately she had sent me a message before that and saw her name was marked with a heart. Awkward night after that. Story apps can give really interesting ones. My favorite that popped up while my boyfriend was holding my phone was something like, "Mike misses you, come back and play," or something like that. Of course, all he did was pull the drop-down menu to see the full notification and laugh. He teased me about it for hours. Not really my phone, but I had text notifications on my computer. I was working with a vendor and sharing my screen. My significant other picked that exact time to send me a text that said, "That was the most amazing whoopee we've ever had last night." I silenced the notification as fast as I could, but the vendor went quiet for half a minute and then said, "Good job." So got out of that awkward zone pretty well. I never shared my screen with notifications active ever again. I was chatting with a guy and it was going well. Nothing racy, maybe mild flirting. So I didn't care when I gave my buddy my phone for some reason. Then across the room he yells, "Yo, this dude just asked if you'd be down for doing it in the butt." For those asking, no, I would not be down to do that, especially not with people I barely knew. Your friend sounds like the kind of person who'd yell that even if that wasn't the message you'd received. Oh, yeah, he is. I love the guy. I saw the message and was instantly turned off and handed the phone back over to my buddy, and he had so much fun trolling this guy under the guise that I was the one texting him. It was awesome. For like a year, whenever I didn't want to chat with anyone, I gave my phone to him, and he dealt with it. That is an incredible amount of trust you have in them. Frankly, I'm so scared of social judgment, even from people that I don't like, that the idea of someone else thinking that I'd written them mean stuff would torment me. I would rather be a coward and just slowly ghost them more and more. This actually happened recently. I gave my dad my phone to call my mum because his phone was dead, and my girlfriend sent me a text that said something along the lines of, "Hey, do you want to have some fun at my house tonight?" My dad lost it laughing. This is more of a crappy contact name, but 2 stories. One of my high school buddies put himself as Jew Boy in my phone. It made my Jewish roommate super uncomfortable, understandably. The other is that I have a friend named Richard. This quickly became D-word PP Willy Splooge Scrote in my phone. Boy, does my mum regret using my phone to take a picture and seeing that notification come up. In high school, there was a couple who had recently started dating. Let's call them John and Sarah. They were both seen as quite innocent, and we were all in theatre together. I was at a rehearsal at John's house and he showed me his phone for a second. Right as I looked, a text popped up from Sarah saying, "I want you to do me from behind." I was a bit in shock and started laughing uncomfortably, and when John received his phone back, he was horrified. Personally, I thought it was just hilarious and definitely a pivotal moment with that group of theatre kids. Me and my friend used to do this thing where we'd make weird noises on the phone, mostly just to annoy the other person. So I decided to call my friend, and when the call was answered, I let out a groan that progressively turned into a screech. Turns out his dad was the one who answered, and all I can hear was him yelling, "Why the frick are you friends with this guy?" in the background. I never saw this as a competition, but if it was, I think that I won. I've had the reverse of this situation happen to me. I was using my flatmate's desktop Mac, and as an iOS user will know, any notification you get on your iPhone will appear on screen on all of your other Apple devices. I was on the computer in his bedroom while he was in the kitchen grabbing a snack, and he received a phone call from an unknown number. I saw this notification on his computer, which gave me the option to answer the call for him. I thought it would be funny if I took the call before he could answer it on his phone, meaning he'd have to run through to his bedroom, where I would be silently laughing myself to an early grave. I clicked to answer, expecting it to be some kind of cold call. The voice on the other end, amplified by my flatmate's gratuitous Sonos speaker setup, said, "Hello, this is the police." My soul left my body at that moment. I absolutely cannonballed out of his room, making the most apologetic eye contact I've ever made with a human being. Turns out he'd been caught red-handed in a traffic incident on his way back from an interview, and they got his contact details from the dashcam footage of his registration plate. They were calling him in for questioning. It was a wonderfully devious experience, which I was absolutely not prepared for, and we've never spoken of it since. My friend texting me, "I will eat you out," while I was showing my mum a meme. Never swiped away a notification so fast in my life. We're both girls, and it was a joke, I think. Probably not, though, knowing her, actually. This one happened to my mum. I went skiing with her and myself. Her partner at the time was also snowboarding, but at a resort about a 20-minute drive from where we were staying. He was with his friends. In the town they were staying at, there's a really nice steakhouse, which does an amazing fillet. Anyway, he sent her a picture of the steak the one night whilst we were just chilling in the hotel room. As she turns the phone around saying, "Oh, look at how amazing the steak looks," another message pops up unbeknownst to my mum saying, "Tastes like you're downstairs." And that is how I cannot eat fillet steak anymore. I mean, these stories are just showing us that phones need a simple side button to temporarily turn off all notifications. I'm gonna take a dump on your chest. Whilst my mother had my phone, I sure had some explaining to do. I was showing my coworker a picture of my son, when my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, sent us a text. It was something along the lines of doing it with all 3 of us. Good news, the bump isn't yours. Bad news, you might have herpes. From a former friend with benefits I'd run into earlier in the day, while my girlfriend at the time was holding my phone. Recently married, 3 months in, my wife went to Yosemite for a girls' trip. I texted and didn't hear back for a couple of days, which worries me because she had cell service and was posting on social. I open up her laptop and iMessages start to flood in, and I saw that a guy I didn't know, but apparently her old high school flame and her were, quote, missing each other. Divorce! I was texting with a platonic friend of mine to meet up when she sent me a bossy text. I responded with a sarcastic, "Sure, my honey, we'll do that, love ya." She didn't read that message. Her parents did, though. My best friend and I moved in together in March. We're both single moms, and our sons are actually cousins. We've been friends for 12.5 years. Shortly after we moved in, her very Roman Catholic grandmother called and gave her a 2-hour lecture on living in sin and how could she forsake God and be with another woman. Oh my God, it took the entire 2 hours for her to convince her grandma we're just friends.
Tattoo artist, who was your worst tattoo virgin? Had a customer that wanted a little watermelon slice on his thigh. Cool 5 to 10 minute nice and easy first tattoo. Nope, on the third line I hear this weird little low-pitched moan. Look up and his head flipped back and the rest of him followed. When he woke up on the floor to 3 guys trying to pull him back up, he said something along the lines of, "What the freak, why are you guys touching me? That's gay." It's been 3 or 4 years since then and he still hasn't come back in to get it finished. If I didn't know better, I feel like that would be a comedy skit on YouTube. This old lady, maybe late 50s, early 60s, comes into our shop. She's quite timid as she approaches the front desk. I say hello and ask what we can do for her. We'll call her AB. "I've never had a tattoo before." "That's fine. It's not as scary as you think. What is it that you want done today?" "Well, my boyfriend is finally letting me have a tattoo." I had a shocked look on my face. "But I just wanted something small and out of the way. So if I change my mind, I don't have to look at it too often." "Okay, that's fair. What is it that you wanted?" "I want Andy's B written on my hoo-ha." Nope. We didn't do the tattoo. It was either some horribly controlling partner that wanted her branded with his name, or some BDSM kink that I didn't consent to be a part of. Screw that. I've heard horror stories about women getting branded with tattoos for illegal purposes. Scary stuff. Also, if I was the tattoo artist who was talking to this lady, I would have been like, "Hey, yo!" Girl comes in to get her ex-boyfriend's name tattooed as a tramp stamp. Comes in with friends and proceeds to scream throughout the process of doing the outline. And she leaves with half of an outline of her ex's name. Why would anyone ever tattoo their ex's name on themselves? Kid wanted to get a full sleeve as his first ever tattoo. I convinced him to get a smaller tattoo for his first ever. Now this sounds like an exaggeration, but he proceeded to throw up after 5 seconds. Dude, I made the similar mistake for my first tattoo. Got a half sleeve on my upper arm. After the line work was done, I had to take a break. Didn't puke though. The rest, a complex solid black design, had to be broken up into a few separate sessions because it hurt far more than I thought it would. Fortunately, my artist was a saint. I dated a tattoo artist for a couple of years and spent a good chunk of time at the shop. One time, a girl we knew from school came in for a large tattoo on her ribs. I think it was some flowers. Anyways, everything is set up, she's stenciling and laying on the chair just chatting and waiting. As soon as the needle hits her skin, she starts screaming bloody murder, moaning and begging him to stop. So he stops, shocked, and she tells him, in her normal voice, to ignore her and keep going. Screaming fit proceeds. Every so often he stops to check if she was alright, and she responds in a normal, cheerful tone that she's excited to see how the work turns out. Needle hits skin, back to screaming like she's being eaten by a pack of wolves. I watched a couple of people walk into the shop and turn around and walk right out. I'm surprised cops didn't show up. Anyways, I think he only got the outlines and some shading done before he couldn't deal with it anymore, and said something about scheduling another session because he had another client coming in. She never came back to get it finished. That's so weird. This type of story seems to be reoccurring in this thread. It's like people have split personalities when it comes to pain or something. That, or she just really liked the pain, if you know what I mean. A friend who never had a tattoo before wanted one on her ankle and was adamant about that. I told her several times that the ankle is a very not fun location, and I asked her if maybe she would prefer something on the shoulder instead. She insisted on the ankle. Okay then. The moment the needle touched her, she hollered. "You sure you want to keep going?" I asked. She said yes. That was the loudest appointment I've ever had, but to her credit, she made it through. Oh wow, reading this thread is bringing up so many repressed client memories. My worst one by far though was about 5 years ago when I was apprenticing in a college town. This girl came in with her boyfriend for a traditional butterfly above her elbow. I was super new, so it took me way longer than it should have. Maybe 2 hours? I lay her down on her stomach with her arm bent to her side. This is relevant later. Anyways, we start tattooing, and within 10 minutes, she started getting a string of text messages from her freshman friends, telling her they're essentially ousting her from their friend group, and they don't want her to contact them ever again. Super mean stuff. Obviously, she's upset. and she's relating all of this to her boyfriend. She starts crying and then full on sobbing. I asked her if she wanted to stop, and she insisted on me continuing, and I just felt too awkward to counter her. She continued to sob on and off for probably another hour, while I just kept plugging away at this dumb little tattoo. At this point, she has cried so much that her tears have gathered where her arm was pressed against the massage table, and they had started to spill over into my lap. So I'm feeling uncomfortable as hell and now also damp. Then, as I'm within 30 minutes or so of finishing, she begins whimpering, then moaning, loudly. At one point, she tells the BF, "This is more intense than hooking up where the sun don't shine." And I wanted to die. As soon as I finished and checked her out, my coworkers, who had all been waiting for me to close, were like, "What the actual crap was going on? Why did you keep going?" But in that moment, all I could think of was to finish that tattoo as soon as possible. To her credit, she came back a year later and told me that she had been too embarrassed to come back, but that she loved the butterfly and wanted another tattoo from me. Her second session was pleasant and without incident. Dude, you deserve a medal for sitting through all of that. What a 180. So she was technically never a client, but I had a teenage girl, about 16 years old, come in once. She wanted a tattoo of a rose on the side of her neck. Now, I'm certainly not going to ever entertain a neck tattoo for a teenager, period, but she didn't even bother to bring in a parent with her to sign for her. So it went from a certain no to an absolutely never in a million years. She got pretty upset and made a scene in the front area, and I told her to leave. After a lot of arguing, she finally left, but not before making an idle threat. Other than sharing the story with my coworkers over drinks later and having a laugh at her audacity, I think no more of it. Until the following week, when an incredibly angry middle-aged woman comes barging into the shop screaming how she's going to have us all shut down and sent to jail. Everybody in the shop was pretty confused, and after we got her to stop screaming at all of us, we finally got out of her why she was so angry. Apparently, her daughter went out and got a neck tattoo without her knowledge. It was around then that I recognized the girl from the week before peeking into the front window. It all clicked. She had found some sketchy artist in a kitchen to tattoo the rose on her neck that I said no to. I told the mother to call her daughter in, and her daughter pointed at me and told her mom that I was the one who did it. The tattoo was terribly done, to say the least, so the mom definitely had several reasons to be livid. She started getting upset again and yelling about how she was going to get me fired and sent to jail, etc. I let her yell until she calmed down enough to listen. Then I explained to her how the week before I told her daughter outright that I would not give her a neck tattoo. Her daughter screamed that I was a liar, and mom started up with another round of yelling, this time about how I was calling her daughter a liar. It was around this time that I just decided to point at our CCTV camera in the front area until the mother noticed what I was doing and stopped. I told her if she would like to, she could review the footage of me denying her daughter, the temper tantrum, and then her daughter leaving the shop. We usually keep footage for about a week or two and then we delete it, so I knew it should still be on the computer. Her daughter started looking pretty nervous around this time, but she didn't say anything. Meanwhile, I find the footage from that day, and the mom watches the entire interaction that I described go down. Then, with the coldest look of anger, betrayal, and disappointment, she turns to her daughter, she takes her outside of the shop quietly, and then screams at her outside for basically everything that just happened and how humiliating it had all been. After a bit, the daughter comes in and gives me a very sarcastic apology and then leaves. Now at this time, I was still willing to tattoo minors with parental consent, but I had been having a lot of crappy dealings with them and occasionally with their parents. I had been considering a no minor at all policy, but this experience solidified that in my mind. Aside from one or two exceptions, I haven't tattooed any minors for the last 13 years. I'm always surprised that you could or can get a tattoo underage with guardian consent. Stuff like that almost always feels like an outdated rule only put in place for child brides. Well, I got a piercing while I was underage, nose piercing when I was 17. I'm Indian American, so it's more traditional for us to have nose piercings at young ages. And also I convinced my mom to let me get one if I had a certain score on my ACT. It was surprisingly hard to do. The shop I went to refused to pierce me unless I brought my mom and my actual birth certificate. Like they wouldn't accept a passport or driver's license. I had to bring my actual birth certificate. It was wild. This girl's first tattoo, and she was my first paying customer. I tattooed people for free during my apprenticeship. She wanted a star outline on the side of her heel below her ankle. She was a bit nervous, so I allowed 2 of her friends to come in with us in the room. I started the tattoo and she immediately jerked away super hard. I warn her not to do that and try to relax. I continue and she jerks her foot again. The 2 lines I've done now look like crap, and I'm already pissed and freaking out inside. I got her 2 friends to hold down her foot and she continues to jerk around, and at one point kicks me right in the jaw. Needless to say, her tattoo looked like crap, and I was certainly crestfallen. I called my mentor after work crying that I had ruined my first tattoo on my client, and she kicked me in the face, which he said, "Wait, what? Nah, screw that. That's not your fault. I'll see you tomorrow at work." Been tattooing for 13 years now, and I still love every minute of it. Got way crazier stories under my belt since that kick in the face. Whoa, you're not allowed to end with "I got way crazier stories under my belt, please share more." Fine, I'll share a few that aren't too long, but they still pack a punch. My first PP tattoo I ever did was on a man that you would never expect at first glance. Some background: studio at the time was small with a shared space among a few tattoo artists. Salon style. This person was a polite young white man who showed up looking like Mr. Rogers, sweater vest and all. He was scheduled to get his first tattoo, a name on the hip. Don't get names of lovers, people. I attempted to convince him that it's not a great idea, but he was adamant. Fine, whatever, I'll get set up. He comes back with his lady, and I ask him to show me exactly where he wants the tattoo. He shimmies his pants down so that the base of his peepee is showing and points there. Whoa! I again try to convince him not to do this, going as far to call him stupid and admitting I've never tattooed a peepee before. He is begging me to do it. Normally, I would flatly refuse wiener tattoos in general, but I did want to try at some point, and he was very polite and not pervy. I told him that I would have to charge him more, and he agreed. He lied down with his pants half off. I wrote the name like I was writing a check. Finished so quickly that my coworkers didn't even notice that I tattooed a wiener. Sometimes I wonder if they are still together. Probably not. During my apprenticeship, my mentor consulted with a woman who wanted to get the ruins of her 2 husbands. Yes, plural. This lady was some gnarly redneck who was polyamorous and into some sort of BDSM lifestyle. One husband was this goatee white dude, the other was a black postal worker. Strange trio, but whatever floats your boat. The first red flag during the consulting was the lady asking, would you mind if my husbands put cigarettes out on my body while you tattoo me? My mentor refused for sanitary reasons and also what the freak reasons. He made me stay in the room for the appointment so he wouldn't be alone with them. Come tattoo time, all 5 of us are in the room, and the second the needle starts, of course, she starts moaning. I'm cringing inside. My mentor asks her to be quiet and not to move so much. She keeps moaning, and one of her husbands grabs her by the face and tells her to shut the freak up. The tattoo continues in painfully awkward silence. My mentor is no stranger to weird crap, but even he was freaked out. Last one. Early in my career, I submitted some work to a tattoo magazine since Instagram wasn't a thing yet. I sent them to a small part of the magazine where they share 1 photo per artist, but they called me and asked me if I was interested in doing an entire article. Jackpot! They interviewed me and asked for a photo of me as well as some of my work. I'm a female tattoo artist and this is relevant later. I submitted 1 photo of me tattooing wearing a t-shirt, not sexy, and it was quite modest. A few months later, the article comes out. Everything is cool until a couple of months after when I get a letter to the studio. Inside was a rambling letter about how they liked my work and wondering if I could offer some tips. It was from an inmate at the prison in another state. It dawned on me that prisons get tattoo magazines, and the article published my studio and address if someone wanted to get a tattoo from me. More creepy letters followed. One guy said that he was getting out in 4 months and wanted to take me out for a drink. The creepiest one came from a man whose entire face was covered in tattoos, rambled about how beautiful I was, and lamenting that he would never get out to meet me. Curious, I looked him up by his inmate number required on the envelope to see why he would never get out. Turns out, he murdered his girlfriend. Yeah, that's definitely not gonna get you a first date. My ex started screaming in pain. The needle wasn't even touching her yet. I was the tattoo virgin. Went in for my first piece, 5+ hours. Was obviously nervous, and I'm not great with needles. But as soon as we started, I was like, oh, this is way easier than I built it up to be. I'm feeling the pain, but I knew I'd be able to commit. After about 20 minutes later, I started to feel really dizzy. My vision is going, so I sit up. My tattoo artist stops immediately, and she's talking to me, but I can barely hear her. The world is closing in, and it's only getting worse. I think she asked me if I need to go to the bathroom, but I know I'll make it a step or two before passing out if I stand up. I can't tell her this because my brain is not working and speech is not an option. Then I just start gagging. The artist is scrambling for something to help me, but she is not fast enough. I vomit into my mask, my hands all over my dress, into my hair and onto the floor. It's a mess. I'm a mess. I immediately feel better and go to the bathroom to clean up whilst the poor artist is wiping up the rest. I come back still stinking of vomit. I offer to take my dress off and literally sit there in my underwear while she finishes. She completes the tattoo like a champion. She sits with me in the vomit aura for another 5 hours. I am mortified and make sure I tip extra for the inconvenience, but the tat is stunning, so it was worth every minute. I'll bring a bucket next time just in case. Hey, no worries, I caught a girl who passed out getting a tiny wrist tattoo. Like, I physically caught her. I was in the shop with my sister. I had just finished my calves and was watching him tattoo my sister when I watched this girl wobble and caught her in my arms when she fell backwards off the stool. I literally thought to myself, wow, people really do pass out. All fun and games until I passed out while getting my thigh piece colored. It wasn't even the pain, just the heat, and I hadn't eaten. It was my 8th tattoo. I was so embarrassed, but apparently it happens all the time. I haven't thrown up yet, but I have to go finish that same piece, so it's a good chance that I might. But if I do, I'll come back here and emphasize it. I like to think I'm pretty good at handling pain, but I've never gotten a tattoo, so I don't think I'll ever be able to compare. Had a 19-year-old lad in the studio. He wanted Laura in large letters on his forearm. I took my time to quiz him. Turns out Laura was his sweetheart. I also spent a long time explaining that tattoos are for life and girlfriends come and go. He remained adamant and clearly explained that if I don't do it, he had a friend with a tattoo gun who would. So I did it, wrapped it up and explained aftercare. As he left, I checked the time. Great, 22 minutes to my next client. 22 minutes later, my client turned up on perfect time, followed less than a minute later by Mr. Loverboy. Apparently, he met Laura at the park who instantly dumped him for being so freaking stupid. It appears she didn't love him as much as he loved her. 22 minutes from tattoo to requesting a cover-up. I'll never understand name tattoos. I cringe when I think about planning my life together with somebody when I was 18 years old. I can only imagine cringing at the name of a former love interest tattooed on my body. One shop I worked at, we had a couple come in on the day we did $100 2" by 2" tattoos. They both were getting some small triceratops outline tattooed behind their ears. Nothing too crazy or detailed, so maybe about 15 minutes each in the chair at most. The guy was losing his mind. He's hyperventilating, laughing, jumping up and down, and yelling questions at us. Visually very nervous. He tells one of our apprentices that this is his first tattoo and keeps asking them how bad it hurts over and over again. The owner went into the back and grabbed an ammonia packet, worried that this guy would pass out the second the needle touched skin. Turns out it was the couple's first date. He had told her that he was very impulsive and she tried to call his bluff and suggest they get matching tattoos. To his credit, he got the tattoo and didn't pass out. Paid for both of them too. Bro, I hope they stayed together because if not, that might be worse than a girl taking a date for a free dinner. Have 2. I did piercings, but my friend was an artist at the shop we worked at. Had a girl come in, no ink, no piercing. She wanted to get, no joke, daddy's girl as a tramp stamp. She was in tears moments into the tattoo, like hysterically. She suffered through altogether probably 25 minutes and walked out with girl right above her waistline. 10 out of 10, hilarious. The other was a guy. He had a few small tats on his arms, nothing crazy. He was also one of those, I watch the UFC and wear tap out, don't mess with me types. He wanted a pretty large tribal chest piece, collarbone to collarbone. He was told that we recommend a couple of sessions. Them tats hurt. And this is a lot of outline and a lot of shading. He insisted no, that he could sit through the pain. He ended up fainting towards the end of his outline. I worked there for roughly a year after and he never came back to get it finished. I don't tap out, I just faint. Not a tattoo artist, but my friend tells this story that I had to share here. He just went to the pharmacy to get some prescriptions filled in North Carolina. They tell him it's going to take about an hour to fill and to come back later. So he walks out of the strip mall and the next place over is a tattoo shop. He goes in and asks for a random tattoo. They tell him it's going to take 15 minutes to do the drawing and 30 minutes to tattoo it on him. He asks what they can do right now instantly, and they tell him that they can pierce his nipples. Within an hour, he gets both his nips pierced, a pretty sweet tattoo, and his prescription filled all in one regular Tuesday afternoon. Not the worst client, but just an unfortunate event. The apprentice at my shop who had only been tattooing for a little under a year was tattooing this girl's wrist recently. Her first tattoo, the word undefeated. Gets the tattoo, it goes smoothly. She likes it, she walks to the lobby, shows her dad, he likes it too. Walks back to get bandaged up, gets bandaged, they walk back to the counter. As he's explaining aftercare, she blacks out, falls back, hits her head on a giant painting hanging on the wall, an Ed Hardy original. The painting falls and glass breaks. He runs over, picks her up and is checking the back of her head. He realizes a giant piece of glass has punctured her shoulder/trap. EMTs come, tell her she needs stitches, and they end up having to take her to the emergency room where she gets 6 stitches. The next week, the girl brought him a giant tub of cookies. She wasn't the worst, but it was an incredibly unfortunate experience for the both of them. His first time having someone pass out and her first time being defeated. That last line killed me because I forgot that the tattoo said undefeated.
GameStop employees of Reddit, what are some of your horror stories? 4 come to mind. A woman comes in to trade in an old Xbox 360 in a box. I open the box and the smell hits me. Rat droppings, grime, cockroaches and all have spent time in this thing. Luckily, my manager noticed and we were able to decline the trade. Spent 5 minutes disinfecting the counter before I helped the next customer. Another time I was trading in a PS4, I think. We were chatting while I was wiping his hard drive and commenting on all his achievements. Sometime during his conversation, he got nostalgic and changed his mind. But not before I had already deleted all his data. I felt terrible. Another time, a homeless looking guy comes in during one of the few times I'm alone in the store. He was dragging around a trash bag and I was doing my best to keep him in eyesight as he was all kinds of sketchy. He managed to stuff an Xbox 360 in the bag and walk out, but I ran out and asked him to give it back, which he did, saying, "Please don't call the cops." Now, this last one kind of shook me. This woman comes in with a gaggle of kids, maybe 4. They were all terrors, running around to different parts of the store, yelling, grabbing things and rearranging them, seemingly causing distractions while this woman tried on 3 separate occasions to get behind the counter. They end up buying something, but then I notice under this big box the oldest kid has picked up, he'd stuffed his hands full of the little DS games that were on the go back section of the counter. There was more here, but I've lost some of the details. But it really gave me the impression that this was all coordinated by their mother. It's one thing to see adults steal. To see kids who are encouraged to do so, just terribly, terribly sad. I was an assistant manager when one of the Madden games came out. 04, I believe. We were doing a big midnight opening for it and everybody was having a great time waiting for the game, which we were picking up from the other store about 30 miles away. Around 11 o'clock, after people had been waiting for 2 hours after the mall closed, I got a phone call. The game wasn't coming. I almost broke down, sitting behind the register, dreading the thought of telling everyone that they'd just wasted their time. To make matters worse, another store within walking distance of us got their games. I just wanted to die that night. I'm so grateful that our customers took it well and didn't get too angry. I had a couple come in to return a Sesame Street video game and controller. They had a receipt from over a year ago. The game was scratched to hell and the controller was full of dried soda. They said it didn't work anymore, shocker, and were furious when I wouldn't give them their money back. Like, standing there screaming at me. I was the manager, so I had no one else there to back me up. It was kinda crazy. Their kid was bawling, the lady was swearing like a syphilitic sailor, and the husband couldn't finish a sentence. Pretty sure they were both super high too, so that was fun. When the PS2 came out, I was assistant manager, and my manager would sell them out of the back room at a markup. Such a snake. I took the demo Xbox home with a copy of Halo before the system launched one night and had a 4-player all-night party. One of our other local stores had someone dig through the outside wall and steal everything out of their back room. One time, a woman screamed at me because her kid was tearing open a toy before paying for it, and I kindly told him to wait a little bit. She seemed on the fence whether she wanted to buy the toy or not for her kid. So, I wasn't glad that her kid was already ripping it open. She then proceeded to scream at me for being really awful with kids, a horrible person, bad at your job, and things like that. Also, she wanted to complain to the manager if I ever talked to her kid like that again. She then angrily paid and walked out of the store. Also, people tinkering or modding their console and then trying to return it to us because it doesn't work anymore, and then angrily insisting on having bought it that way at GameStop. I worked part-time at a GameStop when I was in college. The best story I love to tell is the mom and son story. 40s-ish mom and 7 to 10-ish boy come into the store. It's a large strip mall with lots of stores. Don't even look at the merchandise. Just come up to the counter and ask to let the kid use the bathroom, clarifying that she's not there to buy anything, but has spent thousands of dollars in our store previously. We politely tell her we can't let customers use our bathroom because it's in the back of the store with lots of high-priced merchandise. That's the policy. We have cameras and corporate reviews the footage. Another story I have where I was wrongfully terminated substantiates that one. Additionally, what we don't tell her is that all the used game consoles that people sell back to us were stored in the bathroom. There was 1 month prior to Christmas, I had to do some impressive yoga to get to the toilet. I'm sure those consoles were a hazard, but I digress. But not to be unsympathetic to this kid's plight, we tell the mom that the pizza place next door lets people use their bathroom if they buy something, and the cheapest thing is $1 soda or bottle of water. She starts flipping out on us and spewing expletives, telling us she's paid our salaries 10 times over and that we're going to hell, yada yada yada. Then, no joke, tells her son to just go. Kid actually unzips and pees all over the carpet in front of my register. Then they left. I've never been so grossed out and dumbfounded. Had to close up for the day and half the next day while GameStop paid to have our carpet sanitized. Resulted in a loss of pay for the weekend. Wonder what happened to that kid. He's gotta be in his 20s by now. Former employee here. 2 wonderful stories. Number 1, older lady brings in a bag. She looks like an addict and wants to sell her Wii. I put my hand in the bag and it's soaking wet. Cat piss. She was furious I wouldn't take it. From that day forward, I made every customer take all trades out of the bags themselves. Number 2, my first store was long, and I had a kid and mom in the back. Mom wasn't paying attention at all. 8-year-old walking around. Gets really quiet. Then mom rushes the kid out of the store. Go back there and he took a poop on the floor. Watch the tape. Mom finds him squatting, lets him finish, then takes him out. A gentleman comes in to buy one of our old 360 bundles. It was used and it was the old system that required the hard drive. He brings it back a few days later and complains that it doesn't work. We start our normal troubleshooting methods in store. We couldn't figure anything out, so I do a swap. Take his old system in as defective, then sell him a replacement bundle. I go through to try and wipe the system so we can ship it back to the warehouse. Cockroaches start crawling out of the system instead. I freak out. Throw the system in one of our giant shopping bags, throw that in a box, tape it shut, and throw that in another box. My manager tells me to just shrink it out, meaning we take the loss and destroy it in the back. I take it out to the parking lot and we have to throw it around to destroy it. These cockroaches freaking scatter like marbles on a floor. I'm dancing around the parking lot on my tiptoes to avoid the flood. It was awful. Second stories, one of my regulars was a skunk farmer. I'll say no more. I worked at GameStop a long time ago, but I'll never forget this one. One night, a guy brought in a really dusty and dirty GameCube, wanting cash, of course. I asked him if it worked, and he said he didn't know because he hadn't played it in a long time. I told him that we have to check every console, and when I turned it on and opened the lip, about 100 roaches came running out all over the counter. I worked in a store where theft was a very common occurrence, but this one dude, he nabbed one of the cheap controllers off the wall from the back of the store and puts it in his backpack. Then comes over to the counter, he reaches across the counter, opens a drawer, and steals a brand new game out of the drawer. Takes it away from the register, opens it, waits in line, trades the game in for $25. Then he asks me to look for something in one of the bottom drawers, and he steals the game back he just traded in a second time. After that, he immediately left the store before I could notice he was gone. I gotta give him credit. He was pretty slick. So many other sketchy things too, but this one I just had to laugh at. I've got 2 stories. Quick one is a guy who would come in all the time to ask about / buy obscure Vita dating sims and ask inappropriate questions. Like if the next Dragon Age was going to finally have sex scenes in it. Next one is New Year's Day. Miserable I'm working already. It's super early and first customer of the day. Of the whole year is like this 7-foot tall guy who comes in asking for AV cables for a PS4, cause the one he just bought didn't have one. We immediately tell him the PS4 only uses HDMI, so it wouldn't have AV cables. Even confirming with him, you mean those red, yellow, and white cables, right? He starts getting mad and asks again for the cables, which we again tell him don't exist. Maybe there's an adapter or something, but I've never seen one, and we don't have them here regardless. Maybe check Best Buy. The guy immediately starts screaming, calling us racist and insisting we get him his cable, saying he's homeless and just bought the thing for his grandkids, calling us devils. Thankfully, I froze in fear and confusion and my boss took over and just scooted the guy out the door. Heck of a way to start the year. I used to be the assistant store manager of a GameStop, but nothing really out of the ordinary happened there. Just a lot of lingerers. When I was the manager of a local game store though, there was definitely a lot of wild stories. The one that sticks out the most was this old dude we called Psycho Sexy. He would come in every Monday morning and try to sell me or whoever was working bootleg adult DVDs. He would then tell us a little bit too much detail about how he would use them and that he'd sell them to us for super cheap. Every Monday he'd come in, open up his duffel bag full of adult DVDs, get refused, then leave, and come back the following Monday. This went on for almost 3 years. I was hired to help open a new store, a store where the manager was male, and everyone he hired, female. He was definitely trying to cultivate a hot GameStop kind of situation. Word got around, and we had people coming in to visit ours when they had other stores much closer to where they lived. They didn't really buy anything. They kind of just lurked around for hours at a time, chatting up the staff. There were days when they'd wait for us to close up, and that was kind of scary. I was eventually let go for not being friendly enough, which apparently was about 3 months before the manager had a total screaming meltdown during store hours, declaring himself High Archangel, threw some stuff at a customer, and was later picked up by an ambulance. So I guess my horror story is the whole damn job. My first job was at GameStop, early 2000s. I stayed for about 4 years from when I was 17 to 21. Started as a part-timer and ended up as a shift supervisor. Then boyfriend, later husband, now ex-husband was our store manager for a while. The point is, I've seen some stuff. Let's talk about my favorite one though. It was a weekday afternoon, so we're slow and short-staffed. It's just the two of us, my boyfriend and I, and maybe a customer or two. Someone's playing the Guitar Hero demo, someone browsing the wall. The door jingles and in walks a guy with a huge backpack. I give the customary greeting, "Hey, welcome, let us know if you need anything," and he doesn't acknowledge or respond. I shrug to my boyfriend and go back to cleaning discs or stripping cases or whatever. The guy looks around for a few minutes and we think nothing of it. Finally, he comes up to my boyfriend and gestures for the stack of post-its he's using to label games we're putting in the disc buffing machine. Boyfriend obliges. Guy says nothing, just writes on the post-it. He puts it on the counter in full view of both of us, and in all capital letters is the following message: "I have a gun. Give money?" My boyfriend and I turn sheet white and realize we're being robbed and this guy has a gun in his giant backpack. We're teenagers with no manager and no silent alarm under the desk, and we're terrified. The guy is already putting down the backpack and unzipping it. The other customers are totally unaware and off doing their own thing. And we're going to get murdered in a GameStop at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday over the $100 we have in our tiny till and the safe neither of us has the combo for. He reaches in the backpack and withdraws a light gun for a Sega Dreamcast. Turns out this guy's deaf and wants to sell us a light gun. I once had a lady and her teenage son come in to trade in several DVDs and games they had just stolen from the Walmart behind the strip mall where our store was. Walmart employee calls me to ask if they're in my store and says the cops are on the way, so stall or do whatever you can to keep them there. I said, sure. I told them the cash versus store credit value of their items without mentioning that I can't even take them because they're still wrapped in the cellophane. I walk them around the store and talk about which games are the best value for the money and things like that. The cops show up and ask them to step outside, and I just smile and go back behind the counter. They followed the police out and one officer comes back a minute later to get the merchandise. Last I heard about it. Not a horror story, but definitely weird. Then there was this wealthy couple who had 3 kids, and each kid had a Wii, a PS3, and an Xbox 360. They would pre-order every major game that came out for each system, always the deluxe edition. They spent a ton of money in our store, and they were crazy. So abusive to every employee. They cussed at us and called us stupid. They would ask for things they knew they couldn't have and then throw a fit. They would scour their receipts for anything that could be a mistake and make you explain it to them over and over. Eventually, I went to work for a different company, and they came into my store there and got in line for my favorite cashier. I immediately called a manager over when it was their turn to check out, explained how I knew them, and that there was a 99% chance that they would make the cashier cry. He went over, and just as he got there, they were beginning to raise their voices about some supposed mistake. Luckily, that manager's super good at handling people and got them out without letting them get a word in edgewise. I practically had PTSD from dealing with them. I think they got off on abusing people together. They would sometimes be laughing as they did it. If they found a legitimate mistake in anything, their faces would just light up. Truly evil people. This story's from 2007 or so. GameStop had a used game return policy. 7 days, no questions asked, full refund. People would abuse this constantly, like a rental service. We knew it, and we were able to flag people who did it too often and decline them the returns. Manager policy, not company policy. Then there was this one lady. Old lady, gaggle of grandkids. Seemed so sweet. Was very nice to us while in the store, asking for help, recommendations, all of that stuff. Bought them a PS2 and a freaking gigantic stack of games. Like, had to be 20 to 25 at least. Her total came out to over $400. I rang her out, handed her the multiple bags of stuff, and said to the kids something along the lines of, "Wow, you guys are lucky to have such a great grandma. This many games will last you months." The grandma chuckled and said, "Oh, they're only in town for the week. You guys have that 7-day return policy. I'll see you in 6 days. Years ago, 2007 or 2008-ish, I trained a kid that turned around and robbed the store at gunpoint a month after we fired him for stealing. He and his buddies left without shooting anyone. My coworker was on the phone with the cops after he left while I was getting his old employee file out. I read off his 2 addresses he had down, parents and grandparents, phone number, and things like that. He's still serving time as the gun they used was apparently used in another homicide. Literally, this happened today. A customer brings in probably the grossest PlayStation 4 I've ever seen. I think, oh no, please don't have roaches. I hold it on end and tap it against the floor, and nothing falls out. Nor is there any rustling or things moving. No telltale signs. I take it in. My coworker decides he needs to find out why it's so dirty before cleaning it and opens it up. Inside is the world's first deluxe roach hotel. Managed to keep the hoard contained in the box the console was going in. That console is gone now. Why are people so gross? I got scolded by management for helping a woman for 30 minutes. She bought 12 games and was looking for good recommendations for her son who was on the spectrum. I found every game on her list and a few more to surprise him. She was overjoyed that her son was going to have lots of good games to play. Why were they mad over such a large sale? Oh, because they weren't used. Screw that store. That woman wanted to make sure her son was happy, and I was tasked to do so. I know I did a good job, and you guys can close shop. Never was an employee, but on the night Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, I was waiting in line and this kid rode up in the parking lot and started bragging about how he got the first copy and held his copy out the window. About 10 to 15 seconds of bragging and holding it outside the window, another kid ran up from behind the car, yanked the copy out of his hand, and ran into the woods behind the GameStop. They didn't find the kid who took it, and the kid in the car started crying immediately. Not a horror story, but it makes me laugh when I think about it. I worked at a big box store similar to Best Buy when the Wii U first came out. After months of Wii U being impossible to find, we finally had some in stock. I was helping another customer on a busy day when a guy stopped me to ask the price on the Wii U. How much is the Wii U console? It's $400 Canadian plus tax. Yeah, that's too much money. Can you do any better on the price? Yeah, for sure. I can give it to you for $399.99. That's much better. I'll take 2. I was an assistant store manager for about a year, had done retail before. Our store was right in between a fairly upscale touristy part of town, as well as some of the poorer neighborhoods, so we got all sorts of people. The holiday season was in full swing, and we were always crowded. This particular day we had a few seasonal hires in to help with the workload, and I was behind the counter pulling games as people came up, just to help the transactions move faster. Then, suddenly, a smell hit the entire building like 100 cats had peed in the air conditioner, and someone had tried to get it dry by stoking a fire with burning hair. My seasonals look at me with a mix of confusion and terror as a family of 4 approached the counter, and it slowly became apparent that they were the cause of the smell. I've been noseblind before from staying with an aunt who used to be an animal hoarder, but this was far worse. I sent my seasonals on break, grabbed the hand sanitizer, pumped a small mountain of it into my hands, and as casually as possible smeared it on my upper lip, hoping my facial hair would hold onto it and block the smell. It mostly worked. I was already in holiday rush mode, but this was the fastest I ever got a used Xbox 360 and GTA 5 packaged and ready to go. When they left, we noticed that the store had actually cleared out of all the other customers, who also couldn't deal with the odor. My store manager came out of the back, gave me props for not embarrassing them, and promptly proceeded to fill our store with Febreze.
People who caught their significant others cheating on them without them catching on, how did you respond? She started by confessing that he kissed her while they were watching movies at his place. I voiced my assumptions that she should stop hanging out with him after that, but she got mad, defensive, and refused. When I look back, there's no question that that was the moment my marriage ended. But I loved her, so we did the dance for a few more weeks. She promised to stop talking to him, but started spending an awful lot of time going for drives. One night she fell asleep in her car, and another night she was at the airport having a Cinnabon at 3:30 a.m. The capstone came when she was out having dinner with her sister while I stayed home with the baby. I opened up her laptop to order a pizza and found her browser pointed to real estate websites. Oh lovely, they're shopping for a house together. How quaint. Well, time to put a stop to this. I called her sister, hey, wife's phone must be dead. Can you hand her the phone? Pretty straightforward, and her response wasn't at all surprising. Huh? What do you mean? She's not here. Oh, sorry, I must have mixed up my days. Have a good night. Click. So I called up my wife and made idle chat. How was dinner? How's your sister? How's your sister's boyfriend? Hope traffic wasn't too bad. I let her lie to me for a couple of minutes. When she asked what I was up to, I said, me? Oh, I'm packing your things. I called your sister and you're not there. It's time for you to come home. That was the second of 3 times I kicked her out before it finally stuck. I'm now happily divorced 7 years. She was at the airport having a Cinnabon at 3:30 a.m.? Literally the worst excuse I've ever heard. What the freak? Yeah, that's pretty bad, but I will at least give her some credit for trying. My ex would always just go with, my battery died, or I went to sleep early. Survey says that was a lie. This was my first marriage. Caught him by an obvious breadcrumb trail of late nights, plus long cell phone conversations seen on the bill. I responded by telling him I knew that I didn't want to hear any BS excuses and he was to end it immediately in one last phone call to her or we were done. 8 years of marriage at that point. I gave him 6 months and he still hadn't put her away, so I hit the lawyer and gymmed up. Honestly, I was a little relieved to have an excuse to leave him. Our daughter says he still talks about how much he regrets losing me. He's been remarried 5 years. What a jerk. Ouch. That's terrible that he is using your daughter like that. Divorce sucks for children. Parents making it worse like that drives me nuts. Don't talk bad about the other parent, and don't make the child part of your dating life. Seem like 2 easy rules for everyone to follow. I should note, obviously children should be involved in future long-term relationships. The people who introduce their kids to a series of short-term flings, ugh. After confirming my suspicions, I put his phone back in his bag, woke him up, asked him where he was last night, and he straight up told me the truth by saying, with her. I told him to get up, get his crap, and get out. And so, he did. I'd been suspicious for months, but put it out of my head because the homewrecker was a supposed close friend of mine. Went right under my nose both before and after our wedding. She snuck off during my bachelorette party to hook up with him. Finally, I just read his text and it was all laid out right there like a crappy romance novel. Confronted him and he was pretty nasty to me, as if he had any right. But I wanted to keep my hands clean during this whole ordeal, so I kept it short and civilized. The only revenge is living well. The divorce was smooth after a whopping month of being married, and now I'm happier than I've ever been. You're a better woman than I. If I confronted someone for cheating on me with a good friend, going so far as to screw her at my bachelor party, and he had the nerve to be nasty about it, I'm not a violent person, but I can't see myself not hitting him or at least verbally abusing him. Thanks for the kind words. I know I had every right to be furious, but in the immediate aftermath, I took civility almost to a fault. I was so floored by the whole situation, not to mention what most people would think about such a quick divorce, that I wanted to be sure there would be absolutely nothing that came back to me and made me look bad. The anger I did feel at first was directed at her, because it's so much easier to blame the mistress, you know? I may have clawed her eyes out had I seen her after I found out, but after all was said and done, I went through the sadness and anger, and within a couple of months there were so many doors opening in my life that I couldn't help but be glad things turned out the way they did. And now it's been over a year and I look back and I'm glad I didn't pee in his floor vents or anything, because honestly, he simply doesn't matter anymore. I hate to say it, but I do usually take the high road in a lot of situations, but I will say, sometimes that low road does seem fun in the moment. I drove off, went to where they both worked since I had left my car there earlier that day. Saw them making out in her car. All I could do was stare for a few seconds and had to will myself just to leave. It was that moment that I knew I lost her for good. We hadn't talked since. It's been 3 months. While my girlfriend showered, she invited me to watch Netflix on her computer to keep myself occupied. Google Chrome displayed her frequently viewed pages when it opened up. One of those pages was a Craigslist personal ad. English was her second language, so it was pretty easy to find her ad when I got home that night. I replied. She wrote back and we texted back and forth with my burner phone. I suggested a rendezvous at an upscale bar. I got there 10 minutes early, showed the bartender a picture of my cheating girlfriend, then tipped them $20 and told them to bring her a pina colada when she arrived. Oh, and make sure you give her this too. I had bought an MP3 player and loaded it with Escape, the Pina Colada song. She broke up with me shortly thereafter and never alluded to my ruse. Oh man, I'm sorry about your crappy ex-girlfriend, but I read up the lyrics to that song a few weeks ago. This is perfect. That song is so effed up. It's basically about two people who have a bonding experience over simultaneously catching each other actively trying to cheat on one another. Yeah, that's a relationship that's gonna work out. I thought the same thing. I've listened to that song so much growing up, and I always thought the people in it were dumb. My wife asked me to walk her mom through some computer stuff and handed me her phone. Heard the text message alert hit before we hung up and casually checked if I got off the phone with her mother. The message said, "So, you love me now?" It was from her boss. I went mentally numb. Didn't mention it right away and waited for her to fall asleep. Got her phone and tried to open it. To my surprise, there was a lock code. I woke her up and asked her for her lock code. Told her that my phone had died and I wanted to play a game that we were both playing. She immediately wakes up and starts in on how she knew I was going to do this, and starts telling me how paranoid I am. She nuts out on me and calls her mom to let her know that I'm a lunatic and accusing her of all kinds of things, which I hadn't done yet, but now I'm pretty sure I know what's up. I tell her to go ahead and prove that I'm crazy and put in her lock code and see who the lunatic really is, along with who's the cheater. She puts in the code and several more messages from her boss pop in. Turns out that she was cheating after all. There were signs, but I tricked myself into ignoring them earlier. I left that night and I've never thought about going back. My wife left a few months ago. In hindsight, I think she was having an online affair with an old boyfriend that decided to turn into a real relationship. I guess I didn't really do anything directly in response. She was gone by the time I admitted to myself what was going on. But recognizing what was going on helped me move on from, I'm a horrible husband who wrecked my marriage, to she was a horrible wife who walked away from a good marriage as soon as times got tough. and it's helping me feel not the slightest bit of guilt as I fight to protect myself during the divorce proceedings. I was always the wage earner, and at this point, if the divorce leaves her penniless and homeless, I don't give a crap. She made her bed. Truth be told, I put a lot more into that marriage than I ever got back from it, so good riddance. It's crazy how getting out of a relationship can make you reflect on things. I always thought I was a good boyfriend, but after a while I thought maybe I was a bad one. When I talk about some of the things I experienced in my past relationships, people always tell me that my ex was extremely toxic and that things she did were not normal in relationships. At first I had suspicions. I was out of town and I looked at our cell phone bill, which I never do, to see how many peak minutes we had left for the month. That's when I noticed that she was spending hours on the phone, but never when I was around. She told me that it was a former colleague of hers that had moved to California and was injured in a motorcycle accident. She was never apathetic towards anyone. She would have been better off telling me that she was kicking kittens or belittling children for sport. This went on for a couple of months until she started volunteering at work a lot more. She was a teacher, so it was pretty common for her to have after-school activities. Besides, I was in evening college classes, so it didn't really feel like anything had changed. I mostly felt for our dog, who would often bear the brunt of her not being around. Eventually, she started being really selective about where she kept her phone, even though I had never gone out of my way to check up on her. Curiosity got the best of me, and one morning while she was in the shower, I found her phone and saw the text messages that read, "I hate when you leave. I love you." I'll never forget the feeling I got while reading that. After this, she began getting more creative where she hid her phone. My personal favorite was under the seat of her car. Even knowing all this, I confronted her pretty much daily and was met with absolute silence. That was far more hurtful than knowing that she had cheated. The day after Christmas, she decided to drive out of state to visit her family, with the guy she was seeing, I later learned. She updated me on her travels about halfway through the drive. I called her to warn her that there was a major storm where she was driving, and to be careful. She didn't respond, and I didn't hear back from her for almost 3 days. That was brutal. I had honestly come to terms with the fact that I would be receiving a call that she had been in an accident. I had even called her family to ask if they had heard from her. She finally showed back up at home on New Year's Eve. By this point, there was nothing to salvage of our 10 years together. She kept telling me that she'd file for divorce to end the misery, but I think she actually thrived on the misery she and I felt. She yearned for me to react to her actions. She became more egregious about flaunting being with the guy, even going with him to places she knew my friends would be at. As my grandma always said, it's time to crap or get off the pot. So I filed for divorce and moved on. I made it a goal not to fight over division of assets or belongings, which irked her even more. In the ultimate show of her senselessness, she demanded to get the house and I happily complied. Then the housing market tanked and she was stuck with a mortgage on a house worth less than half of what she owed. After it was over, I learned that he was a janitor at her school. She got pregnant before my side of the bed was even cooled off, and he had cheated on his wife to be with my ex. I got my revenge by living well after it all ended. I graduated from college, then law school, met and married an amazing woman, and we have a son now. It was painful at the time, but in hindsight, she did me the biggest favor in the world. When I was reading this, I felt like this guy dated a girl I dated years ago. My ex also thrived on making me feel miserable. She would do the same thing of saying she was gonna do something and then not respond for the whole night or the next day. She flat out told me to my face that she liked making me upset for fun. I finally came to the realization that she was a horrible person when my grandfather passed away, and she was just so cold and had no empathy about the situation. After a year or more of suspicion and shady behavior, his ruse was blown when a friend of mine also knew the other woman. She was hearing both sides and deduced that we were talking to the same dude. Arranged for both of us to meet at her house. Explained our stories and figured out he was playing both of us. I ended up calling him and telling him I was standing there in the same room with X, Y, and Z. He hung up on me. It's been done ever since and caused a lot of heartache for the both of us. It took me a while to heal from that. I got home from work early, spouse in bed with 2 large women, our son sleeping close by. Locked eyes, saw the oh crap look, picked up my son and his bag, grabbed all the clothes on the floor, and went to my mom's. I have no idea what they wore home, but nothing of mine was going to cover that tonnage. It's probably not the same scenario you were looking for, but my ex-girlfriend accidentally confessed to cheating me 3 years after she dumped me. I got all sorts of reasons why she wanted to end our multi-year relationship. She just left out that she was screwing someone else. By this time, the same guy was her fiance. So here's what I did. I sent her an email. The exchange went like this. Hey, is it okay if I email you here? Wow, hi, yes, this is good. Are you okay? Well, not really. Based on your Facebook post, can you explain how your anniversary with new guy is in January when you dumped me out of the blue on February 6th? Oh, that's not really our anniversary, but we're both so busy. I didn't start dating him until shortly after our relationship was over. He's not the reason why our relationship ended. I miss having you as a friend more than you'll ever know. I waited a few weeks, then forwarded the entire email exchange to her fiance, let him figure out why that wasn't their real anniversary, why he wasn't the reason we broke up, and why she misses me as a friend more than I'll ever know. I bet it's more than he knew too. I did something like this once, kinda. I was dating this girl and she started being really weird. I rushed into dating her after a long-term relationship, so I let a lot of things slide. I decided to message her friend to see if he knew what was going on with her. I told her this the next time we hung out and she freaked. Turns out, after we broke up, she revealed that she was hiding 2 kids from me. And that friend was the baby daddy. I sure know how to pick 'em. Late to the party, but I really want to share this. So my BF and I had been together for about 2 years. Great relationship, no problems. This was my first real relationship, so I was in heaven. I was at college out of town for about 2 months when I went home to visit. I was planning on going to my BF's house that evening. A friend offered to give me a ride there. On the way, she pulled into a parking lot and broke down crying. She had something awful to tell me. She was dating his neighbor/friend at the time and had overheard my BF saying that he was getting it on with this girl at work and how cool it was to get a blowy by a girl with a tongue ring. I was devastated, but hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Got to his place and he wasn't home yet. She went to her BF's house and clearly let them know I knew, as they all gathered on the front porch with drinks waiting for a showdown. I should say that this was before cell phones were common, so he had no way of being warned. He gets home, he runs to me and swings me around all lovey-dovey, very romantic style. I fern happiness. We sit on the porch a few minutes and I begin to give signs that I was ready to show him some affection. We head to the bedroom, things start heating up, I slowly undress him, taking my time, get on my knees, grab his little buddy, look up with my bedroom eyes and whisper in a devilish voice, "Should I get a tongue ring since that's what you really like?" The look of pure fear will forever be etched into my brain. I wish I could say I did something awesome as he was still in my hand at the time, but in reality it was just a massive explosive verbal fight after that. Of course, I was fully clothed, and he, anxiously, was undressed the entire time. Found the Plan B receipt, and moved the freak out while she sat on the couch threatening to end herself. Throwaway for obvious reasons. My boyfriend and I had been together for a couple of years before I found out. He was a lot more careful hiding it from me at first than he was later on. I knew before we were together that he had a couple of 3-ways with his best friend and his best friend's wife. What I didn't know was that after it got awkward, he and the wife had got together while his best friend was at work, and while I was at work when me and my boyfriend were still dating. I eventually found out one night while he was sleeping beside me because he left his Facebook logged in on my computer, and I didn't even notice it until a message from her popped up. It was a response to a message that he had sent her telling her how much he was in love with her, and how he had brought a pair of her underwear in his suitcase on a vacation he had just returned from with his parents. She was wondering when they could meet up again. I was completely destroyed. I ran to the bathroom and threw up and shook for the rest of the night. I couldn't sleep. I'm shaking now as I type this, remembering and having tears in my eyes. I couldn't get over the betrayal. This is someone I plan to spend the rest of my life with. We lived together and we were talking about getting married soon. I scrolled through some of the previous messages, and the two of them had been messaging each other a lot. I alluded to the messages the next day without letting on that I knew, and he denied everything. I let it stew. He left his Facebook logged in on my computer several times in the months following, and there weren't as many messages for the following few months. But then they started up again. It was absolutely devastating. Anytime I would confront him about it, which got more direct, His response was pure denial, and he would turn it around on me somehow, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Eventually, I couldn't take the deceit any longer, and I ended up leaving him. I felt like the situation was killing me. I was a wreck, and I was getting further and further into substances to numb myself from it, and my depression was getting exasperated by it. The whole situation killed my self-esteem for a very long time. I am still in love with him, and I always will be. I know how stupid that sounds, but sometimes you really can't help who you fall in love with. He actually didn't see anyone after we broke up, until he died almost a year later. I constantly think about how I wish things would have gone differently, and long for a life we were trying to build together. Damn, I was not expecting the boyfriend to die in that story. But part of me thinks that maybe the reason why the OP still longs for them is because maybe they thought they could change or fix the person if they tried harder. In reality, some people just suck and you can't change them. Even though it hurts, it's best that you moved on. I didn't really catch her cheating, but all the signs were there. Before she graduated college, she was hired at a doctor's office as an assistant and would work late hours. I kind of expected this because I knew the medical professions consume a lot of time. I started to notice that she would spend more and more time at work, which started to get suspicious. About 4 or 5 months into her being hired, I knew something was up. She would go to work at 6 a.m. and then not come home until midnight some nights, saying that I had to drop off medication at a patient's house, or I went to the 9:30 workout class, both of which didn't make any sense because I called her coworker and asked when the office closed, 7 p.m., and when the emergency staff started, 9 p.m., and if she was a part of that staff, which she was not. Secondly, I went to the same gym and the latest class they had was at 7:45 p.m. The second sign was how distant she had become in the relationship and how protective of her phone she got. Normally, she wouldn't mind showing me pictures or texts on her phone, but she increasingly became overprotective. She would also refuse to sleep in my bed. She was one of my roommates at the time. After we both graduated, I finally decided enough was enough and it was time to confront her. She denied it, of course, but at this point in the relationship, I didn't feel a connection with her anymore and our love was dead. The night before I broke up with her, my roommates, including her, and some of her friends, some of the dudes, all went out for drinks. Everyone got completely wasted and we were all a big mess. What I remember from that night is wondering where my ex-GF went and where one of her guy friends went. Well, as it turns out, she was feeling sick and had to leave the bar. Thankfully, her guy friend was there to take care of her. When everyone decided to leave, one of my more sober friends got everyone together, but couldn't find my ex-GF and said guy friend. We started a search party and eventually found them with her head in his lap. Now, I barely remember this, but my friend said she wasn't going to town on this guy, but resting her head on his lap. He could have been telling me the truth or just trying to avoid a fight from breaking out. Regardless, I broke up with her the next day. The head on the lap thing seems probable, but all the other things the OP lists were definitely grounds for the breakup in my opinion. Went home instead of work, gathered all the clothes I really liked, my consoles, and anything I could think of that wouldn't be missed. When she went to work that night, I grabbed all the things that would be missed, including myself, and left.
What overlooked fact from a movie will completely change the way I see it? In Return of the Jedi, it's implied that the Ewoks feast on human flesh when they were going to cook the gang on spits. At the end of the movie, there's certainly more than enough stormtrooper fillets to go around. Saving Private Ryan. In the beginning, when they're clearing out the trenches and bunkers after taking the beach, 2 German soldiers come out with their hands up and yelling, seemingly trying to surrender. They're both shot dead and the American soldier says they were saying, "Look, I washed for supper." It was actually in Czech, not German. And the man was saying, "Please don't shoot me. I'm not German. I'm Czech. I didn't kill anyone. I'm Czech." He was a Czech taken prisoner by the Germans and forced to fight for them. It made me sad when I learned that one. All the traps in Goonies are designed so that one person can make it through alive, especially if he or she is taken hostage and forced through the tunnels. The ship is rigged to be able to be sailed by a crew of 1, so the one person who makes it through the traps can sail away with the treasure for themselves. In The Dark Knight, the Joker tells Two-Face how he sees social order as the death of one being a tragedy only if the person is special enough, But people that are expected to die don't get attention from others. He refers to this as being part of the plan and established order. In real life, Heath Ledger died before The Dark Knight came out, and everyone talked about it. However, what a lot of people don't know is that Conway Wycliffe, a stuntman who worked on the movie, died as well when a stunt went wrong. The movie is dedicated to both men, but I don't need to tell you which one got more press. In Inglourious Bastards, the burning of the cinema at the end parallels the actual church burning by the Nazis at Oradour-sur-Glane. In fact, most of the movie sees us compelled to cheer on our protagonists as they commit war crimes and atrocities. And we feel permitted to enjoy this because they're morally superior and justified in their actions, given our knowledge of the vileness of their enemy and what they've inflicted upon our heroes. Yet, in reality, this is exactly the pervasive mentality the Nazis used to justify atrocities against the Jews and other minorities. A lot of people watch the iconic scene in Singin' in the Rain and assume the cop and pedestrians react the way they do because it's simply weird to sing and dance in the rain. However, the previous scene sets the time at around 2 a.m., so it makes more sense thinking they probably see him as a ridiculous drunkard who's finally going home after a night of binging. Shaun of the Dead. Spoilers ahead. The entire plot is revealed at the start of the movie. We'll have a Bloody Mary, first thing. Mary gets impaled and dies. A bite at the king's head. Philip is bitten. A couple, David and Di, at the little princess, Liz. A stagger when they pretend to be zombies. Down by the bar for shots, killing zombies. Talk about great filmmaking. The entire plot of Home Alone is set into motion when Kevin gets into a fight with his family over spilled milk. Fight Club. When Tyler Durden calls the narrator back in the phone booth, the camera slowly tracks towards the phone. On the left of the phone, a notice can be seen saying, "No incoming calls allowed." When Tyler and the narrator are on the bus, the long-haired guy pushes past Tyler without a word, then says "excuse me" as he pushes past the narrator. When Tyler and the narrator hit the first car with baseball bats, Tyler hits first, but the alarm is triggered only after the narrator hits. There are so many littered throughout the movie. In Pinocchio, there's a group of men kidnapping boys and somehow magically turning them into donkeys. And absolutely nothing is done to stop this. And it's not like the consequences of it go away. Pinocchio keeps the donkey ears and tail for the duration of the movie. The movie just ends and everyone forgets that this is still happening. Kind of a dark ending there, Disney. In The Fifth Element, the bad guy, Zorg, and the hero, Corbin Dallas, never actually meet, or even really know about each other. In fact, Corbin works for and is fired by Zorg via the cab company. The closest they get to each other is getting into/out of elevators on the cruise ship just before it blows up. In the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, not many people understand why Hal went crazy and murdered the crew of the Discovery, or anything that happened after that. Hal was programmed to relay information 100% accurately and completely, but the government types ordered Hal to keep the actual objective of their deep space mission secret, the mission to investigate the signal sent from the monolith on the moon to Jupiter orbit, all for petty political reasons. Hal took these conflicting orders and came to the only conclusion a computer could come to eliminate the conflict. He first decides to try to halt communication with Earth. He triggers a fault in the relay antenna, so the crew would need to take it offline. When he realizes that the crew is considering taking him offline for his odd behavior, he panics. The best solution now seems obvious. Eliminate the humans, and he won't have to conceal the details of the mission. Conflict averted. His logic is cold to a fault. Of course, Dave Bowman survives and is able to deactivate Hal. What happens next is sort of glossed over in the movie. David spends months in space alone, with zero communication with anyone, farther away from any other human being than anyone has ever been. He goes into a sort of autopilot mode. He does his daily duties and those of Frank, his dead co-pilot. He runs the huge ship with flawless efficiency. He practically becomes a machine himself. Nothing but the mission. After the remainder of his flight, he arrives at the monolith orbiting Jupiter. He flies a pod to the surface of it to study it, and realizes that there is no surface. It's a gateway. He enters the gate, and this is where the weird eyeball trippy effects heavy breathing takes place, and flies through a wormhole, a stargate, to a very far away star in a distant galaxy. On his way, he passes over some alien landscapes and some other weird spaceships. When he arrives, he lives out the rest of his human life. He spends like 30 plus years in that weird empty room, getting older in complete isolation. When he finally dies of old age, the aliens who created the monoliths, who placed one on Earth in prehistoric times and used it to teach hominids how to use tools, who buried one on the moon with an alarm that when it would be discovered would point the way to the Stargate, who created that room for David to live in, and where they fed him and studied him, gathered his consciousness and turned him into one of them, a being of energy and knowledge. He took the form of a floating baby and decided to revisit humanity. The whole film is a speculation on evolution of humanity, from the origin of man to the final result, from a creature who discovers tools to save their race, to a creature who relies on tools and machines to expand their horizons, to a creature who's nearly destroyed by those machines, to becoming something of a living machine, the best of both worlds, to a creature who is enlightened past such petty things as using machines to kill each other. Ariel from The Little Mermaid can write in English. We know this because she signed her name quite beautifully on a contract after she read it. So why didn't she attempt to communicate via written word with Eric? Instead of just writing in the sand, she immediately resorts to clumsy charades. In the 1990 version of Total Recall, the character Quaid, played by Schwarzenegger, gets a dream implant and either gets the girl and saves the planet by making Mars's sky blue, or he has a psychotic episode from an implant that went off course and is lobotomized. The movie was apparently designed to be specifically unclear which, so the viewer is compelled to see the movie multiple times. The tech who sets up the implant prior to a possible psychotic episode caused by the procedure says of the implant, "That's a new one, blue sky on Mars." District 9 is not in fact about apartheid. In Neil Blomkamp's short Alive in Joburg, on which D9 is based, there were similar interviews to those at the beginning of District 9. The difference is that all of those interviews were real. The filmmakers simply asked residents of Johannesburg what they thought of immigrants from Zimbabwe, and they received the remarkably hostile responses. The film isn't just a parallel to apartheid, but more about the current sentiment towards immigrants right now. In Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ferris's constant complaint and his justification for many of his shenanigans is that his parents won't buy him a car. Toward the end of the movie, when Ferris's mom is driving his sister home from picking her up at the police station, there's a quick throwaway where mom complains that all this mess screwed up the deal she was working on, and that the money from the deal was supposed to be used to buy Ferris a car. Ferris ended up screwing himself out of the car he so desperately wanted. In Independence Day, one often mocked scene in the movie is when Jeff Goldblum uses a regular old MacBook to hack into the alien ship and disable with a virus. The obvious question is, how did they do this? It's simple. They cut a scene out, who knows why, where it was all explained that all of our modern technology, computers, microchips, everything, was all reverse engineered from the crashed fighter. Hence why Goldblum was able to hack into the alien ship. He knew the code already. Once you know this fact, those entire scenes make sense. This scene was shot and it was added to later versions of the movie, including the DVD release. But the original theatrical release and the VHS release did not have them. The main plot of The Matrix was supposed to use human brains as processors for machines, not power sources. That's why Neo could do all those things. He could interact with the code more fully. In Lilo and Stitch, Lilo looks after a fish named Pudge who she claims controls the weather. Lilo's parents died in a car accident due to bad weather. For me, it explains a lot of Lilo's behavior. In Pan's Labyrinth, it's real. It's not just a little girl's fantasy. She's actually a princess and everything that happens is real. Almost everything in the story can be explained by coincidence or imagination, except for one thing. At the end, the guard guarding her room is told to kill her if she leaves. That is the only exit and the windows are too high and barred. So the only way she could get out is if the chalk actually worked. This was confirmed by Guillermo del Toro. The chestbuster scene in the first Alien movie was almost completely ad-libbed. Scott wanted to get as natural a reaction as possible from the actors, so he didn't clue them in as to what was to happen. They were told something shocking was to happen in the scene, but not exactly what. The reactions you see as the blood sprays over everything are as real as they can get. The genie completely scammed Aladdin. Aladdin asked the genie to make me a prince. He then goes on to suffer for lying about being a prince and learns a valuable lesson about being truthful in himself. He asked to be a prince, not to look like one, not to have everything a prince has, to be an actual prince. He should have land and titles and a bloodline now. When Jafar wishes to become sultan, he becomes the sultan. The previous one is stripped of his land, even his clothes. Why didn't this happen for Aladdin when he made the exact same wish? In Pulp Fiction, when Butch had to go back to his house to get his watch, the reason Vincent didn't react to Butch making Pop-Tarts and just making general noise is because he thought Butch was Marcellus Wallace. Vincent thought Marcellus was back from getting food, which is why you see Butch randomly running into Marcellus. He's holding a box of food and coffee. Jack Nicholson's character from The Shining was originally to be played by Robin Williams, but Kubrick thought he was too crazy for the role. Let me say that again. Robin Williams was too crazy, so the alternative was Jack fricking Nicholson. In The Big Lebowski, Donnie is the physical manifestation of the movie's theme. If you think about it, nobody knows anything throughout the entire film. Bunny and the Nihilists think there's actual money out there. Mr. Lebowski thinks Bunny's actually been kidnapped. And obviously, the dude and Walter have no idea what's happening. You can see this in Donnie's character in a few ways. First, he's constantly told to shut up because he's out of his element and acting like a child that wanders into the middle of a movie and wants to know what's happening. Second, his character has absolutely no influence on the film's plot, which is unheard of when it comes to a character with that much screen time. And lastly, after everyone in the film finally figures out what's happening and ignorance is vanquished, Donnie dies. 300 is told by a Spartan, the soldier Leonidas sent away before the final battle, as a story to motivate other Spartans right before they charge at the ending credits, which is the real-life Battle of Plataea, where a united Greek force decimated the Persian army. This is why the film contains so many fantastical elements, such as bombs, elephants, giant monsters, why the immortals had fangs, and things like that. The whole story is just propaganda told to soldiers to make the Spartans seem superpowered and the Persians evil monsters. The implication is that much of it is exaggerated for dramatic effect so the soldiers would fight harder. Moulin Rouge. Satine dies from tuberculosis, which is a contagious disease. She very likely gave it to Christian. He'll probably die from it, while the Duke was spared from that. In addition, the livelihood of the Moulin Rouge was dependent upon the Duke's money. The scenes with Christian writing his novel are set against the backdrop of an abandoned and destroyed Moulin Rouge. Satine's choice to do things for love literally destroyed the lives of everyone she cared about. In Forrest Gump, Lieutenant Dan seemed furious that Forrest was awarded a Medal of Honor. However, as Lieutenant Dan was his first officer in his chain of command, he would have had to be the one that originally suggested it. Superman Returns. The boyfriend, Richard, played by James Marsden, is all around a very great fellow. He's a pilot, loving father figure, and all around a Superman. Superman, on the other hand, leaves Lois because, best explanation, he felt like it. He comes back years later and expects her to continue where they last left off, as if years haven't gone by. She hasn't found someone else, has a kid, and that he left her to go have a vacation in space. Of course, ultimately, despite it all, she chooses Superman, because no matter how great of a person you are, you don't compare to Superman. Some salt on the wound is the revelation that it was Superman's kid. The kid he left behind and left Lois to take care of on her own. Oh yeah, he also saves Superman's life. And Superman's like, thanks loser, I'ma still take your family away. What a jerk. The film Watchmen depicts how many different world events would have been with superheroes present, especially Dr. Manhattan. For example, the Vietnam War is won by the US in a week with Dr. Manhattan's help, and the famous photo of a sailor kissing a nurse when World War II ends becomes a picture of a female superhero kissing that same nurse. There are 10 million changes, many of them extremely significant, that all occur in world history because of the addition of superheroes. So at the beginning of the movie, there's a montage of superhero history with a scene of the Night Owl punching out a thug outside the stage door of a movie theater. But guess what? The signs in the background show the production in question to be Die Flirtema, the Bat. The venue is Gotham Opera House, and the couple emerging from the theater in the left side of the frame are presumably Martha and Thomas Wayne. They even threw in a Batman poster just to really drive the hint home. In the Watchmen universe, Bruce Wayne never becomes Batman because his parents aren't killed. In the 8th Harry Potter movie, during the scene when Harry and McGonagall confront Snape in the Great Hall, as Snape is escaping, he redirects one of McGonagall's spells to hit the Carrow twins who are standing behind him. He's trying to help Harry, while still not revealing his cover to Voldemort. The Land Before Time. Notice at the end, Littlefoot finds the Great Valley after running through a dark tunnel with a light at the end. He then finds this paradise, complete with his long-lost grandparents. He's dead. They all died, and they're in heaven together. This was originally planned to be explicitly stated, but then it was decided to be too dark an ending for children, so they made it symbolic instead. Forrest Gump when Jenny tells him he has a son. Throughout the whole movie, the viewer assumes that Forrest gets by relatively alright because he's mentally handicapped. No matter how tragic it gets, there's this little comfort one can take in understanding that he never fully appreciates how awful things can be at times. He's too simple to feel the tragedy he suffers when his life goes wrong. But when Jenny tells him he's a father, what's the first question he asks? Is he like me? And then it hits you that he understood all along. Every time Forrest's mistakes hurt himself and those around him. Every time he was too dumb for his own good. He understood that he had made himself and all the people around him suffer at times. Even though he always tried to do the right thing, far from simple, he understood how much suffering was caused by his handicap, and only admitted to it when he found out his son might have to carry the same burden. Starship Troopers is thought of as a mindless action movie, but there's a subtle subplot throughout the whole movie. The reason Earth goes to war is because of the meteorites sent there by the bugs on Clentathu, but it's hinted at in the movie that the odds of that actually happening are almost impossible. That would mean that the meteorites were just a natural phenomena that the government used as an excuse to attack the alien planet, which means the protagonists were not protecting Earth, but rather invading an innocent planet. Terminator. Kyle fell in love with a photo of Sarah Connor that he had in the future. A photo that's taken at the end of the film at the very moment she's thinking about how much she loves Kyle. The philosophy of the Jedi Order is a lie. They preach balance, but the entire focus of their existence is not establishing balance and peace between the light and the dark sides of the Force, but rather focusing on wiping one out while preventing themselves from being wiped out in the process. This is one of the reasons why an individual Sith appears to be so much more powerful than an individual Jedi. It's not that the dark side is inherently more powerful, it's that the Force of the cosmos is trying to even the odds. This seriously changed my view on the entire Star Wars universe. Jareth is not in love with Sarah in the Labyrinth. Sarah is a teenager who's on the cusp of growing up. She feels lost because her father is remarried and they have a new baby together. She feels forgotten and ignored and taken advantage of, and resents her baby brother for stealing her father's love. She's also on the cusp of womanhood and wants attention from men, but is also so afraid of that attention. She has no idea what love is, so she makes her wish and the Goblin King takes her baby brother away. And Sarah gets to act out her fantasy where a powerful magical king is in love with her, a special flower, and will whisk her away from her boring life. Only she has no idea what love actually looks like. You can't dream something you've never experienced. Jareth acts as he's expected to act, because Sarah's the one controlling everything, since this is, after all, her fantasy. In the end, she realizes that she has no idea what being in love and being responsible are like, so she chooses to wake up and be a better big sister to her baby brother and stop being such a brat. It's a movie about growing up, not about love. In How to Train Your Dragon, Hiccup's acceptance as a Viking is dependent upon his ability to kill a dragon. After meeting Toothless, he decides that isn't really what he wants, and that dragons aren't actually evil. But then at the end of the movie, he kills a dragon, and is no longer ostracized by the rest of the Vikings. So not as much changed as you think it did.
What's a telltale sign that someone is a selfish person? When conversations don't feel like conversations, they are one-sided talks about what they want, their thoughts, their life, their priorities, etc. When you are able to actually slip in a word, your words are used as transitions in their dialogue. No matter how you format your words, they all just add to the plot of that person's story. What you say and what you do are pawns in their game to be manipulated in a way that belittles your experiences, your actions, your opinions, and your choices. Something I personally want to add to this is most selfish people can't have conversations. I've noticed this with the girl I used to fool around with. She would try to make conversation by making it about me with, "What are you doing? How was your day?" But no matter what I responded with, it always got a 1 to 2 word answer. That's cool. Interesting. That way they give you the illusion that they care, when in reality, they just use you when they need you. They gladly take any favors you do for them, and when asked if you could reciprocate once, they get defensive or aggressive, and act like you're the selfish one for daring to expect something in return. It doesn't make you a bad person to expect reciprocation in a relationship with someone else, romantic or platonic. Relationships are give and take, and it makes them healthy. It's not entitlement to expect kindness if you give kindness. If you're the only one giving, you're being taken advantage of. And for clarification, for anyone who thinks doing something kind with the expectation to gain something from it can be manipulative, I'm not talking about narcissism and manipulation. I'm talking about the natural give and take in a relationship. It's not manipulative to expect certain things out of a relationship. Depending on the kind of relationship that is. The whole reason we make relationships is because they give us something, whether that be support, love, safety, or other advantages. It isn't a bad thing, it's a human thing. Typically with give and take, if you notice a pattern of one person consistently taking without giving, the one taking is the problem, not the one giving. The kind of people who use this as a manipulation tactic aren't the ones who stick around in a relationship for years, doing favors and kind things without being asked to. They're more than likely to do one favor and demand twice as much in return. Why do I know this? I've had these people in my life, which is what gives me the realization I'm commenting here. Yeah, I'm actually going through this with my roommate. She always asks for my help, expects me to walk her dog every day, constantly asks me to pay rent in advance even though I'm not getting any income for 3 weeks. Yes, she asked me to pay a second rent just a week after the last. She never thanks me for walking the dog. Any advance payment? No thanks there either. She'll just keep asking as if I'm her bank account and then get angry when I'm unable to pay. Last week she asked me to cook extra food because we had guests coming over and she threw a fit because I used beans. It's not that she or anyone else can't eat beans, it was just her dislike of the day. She had eaten those same beans and other dishes and liked it. I had put so much effort into cooking more food than normal and her behavior was worse than usual. I have completely stopped helping her or even speaking with her. That sounds like my ex-wife so much. Did plenty for her. Would do anything she wanted to do even if I wasn't thrilled about it. But when it came to something that I wanted, she never seemed to have time for it. I eventually got to the point where I wouldn't even try to mention anything I wanted or liked. I put plenty of thought into gifts for her, but if I ever got something, it had no thought put into it. Basically got to the point where I felt selfish for even wanting anything. Took me a while to accept that I wasn't the problem or the selfish one. Eventually, I realized through help from a therapist that it was straight mental abuse. Relationships take compromise. When anything that happens to them is the worst thing in the world, and whatever happens to you is not that bad and a waste of time to talk about or even deal with. I know your mom died a month ago, but my best friend of 3 years died too, so I don't see why you're so sad all the time. I think narcissism and selfishness go hand in hand, so there you go. A friend of mine was talking to a mutual ex-friend about how she was feeling crappy because it was coming up on the anniversary of her sister's murder. The ex-friend responded that she was also feeling crappy and needed support because her boyfriend, who had been visiting for the weekend, had gone home. We both cut her off after that. After my sister's husband passed, a friend said, "I know exactly how that feels. My husband is in the army and goes away for months. But said husband comes home, can email, video call, and most of all, is not dead." She's now an ex-friend to everyone. I'll admit, I've caught myself doing the I know how it feels thing with friends before, but it's usually because I've been through the same thing. However, I've never tried to pass off a death of someone being on the same level as missing a partner that went home. That's just dumb. They feel no remorse for how they've hurt others. They don't think that they're wrong in the slightest bit. They can't shoulder any bit of responsibility. Look, it's not my fault that you can't do anything right. Very well then, I'm sorry you don't understand my point of view. You can't forget the classic, "You just misunderstood what I said. I didn't mean it like that." My former neighbors were bad alcoholics. Every night is a Friday night and weekends are like the new year. The police were constantly getting called to their house. Their kids not only destroyed their property, but other people's as well. Their junk was always thrown all over multiple yards. Their landlord ended up evicting them. My neighbor was pissed and fought hard in court to stay because they paid their rent via assistance. It was everyone else's fault but theirs. It was the landlord's fault for being biased against them. It was the neighbor's fault for complaining about their kids. It was their parents' fault for not helping more. Everyone was to blame, but not them. All I can say is it's been peaceful since they've been gone. They don't remember the times people have helped them, but remember clearly all the times that they helped others. It's easier to remember when you can count the number of times on your fingers. They bring nothing to the potluck, but are the first in line. Dude, screw these people the most. If you don't bring anything to the potluck, you better at least be cleaning up after the party. They respond how worse their situation is when you're sharing problems with them. They don't try to help or listen, they just draw attention to their side. Ah, the complainers. I have a friend like that, and lately I've just been letting her talk, with dry responses such as, "Oh wow, tough luck. Yeah, you've told me all of that via text." And I would talk only if she asked me a question. Well, the hangout got silent super fast. And it seems she is no longer satisfied sharing the details of her life with me. Nice. I once had a friend who would just complain all the time about everything, never really doing anything to fix the problems, and if she did, she'd still complain about it. One day I tell her that I want to be her friend, but our conversations were always so negative, and couldn't we just talk about some more positive things? The whole dynamic of the friendship changed, and she straight up just stopped talking to me saying, "I don't know what to talk to you about anymore." That admission tied with her inaction blew me away. We drifted apart and are no longer friends. I've actually done this with friends before as well. I've often been told that I give the comfortable vibe, where people can just talk to me about anything, which is nice, but I also have a problem solver brain, so when I have friends that complain about the same thing all the time and don't try to improve after my advice, I just lose interest in those conversations because they're meaningless at that point. Like, I understand venting, but if the bad smell doesn't leave the place after a while, something might be rotten. If you are in a group and there's that one person that is constantly interrupting the middle of what you or anyone else is saying, generally to brag about themselves with a one-upper story, that's a precursor to stop associating with them. I've met too many of those people in my day, and they are more often than not happy to throw you under the bus whenever the opportunity arises. If they always talk about themselves, I know many people that will not shut up about their day for an entire call, then just leave you when you start talking about yours. Likewise, but some people just aren't aware that they're doing that. I've politely mentioned that to a couple close friends, and they've been way more aware about their behavior since. Life isn't binary, and good people might have bad habits without knowing it. So trying to help them is my way of thinking. By the way, your mileage may vary, of course, hence me saying some people. I think it depends on the situation. I have a lot of friends that I keep in touch with via voice text messages or video text messages. Since these aren't real conversations because we respond when we can, both parties usually end up speaking about their days after quickly responding to any questions. They have that superpower that leads everything back to themselves, even when you're actually talking about your own life or a specific problem of yours. They somehow make it that you start talking about them instead, without even changing the topic. Nearly everyone does this to a point. There's an extremely fine line between trying to comfort someone by saying something like, "I recently went through something with my father as well. I'm so sorry," and making their issues about yourself. It's crazy how common it is. And I guess if you are sharing something tragic to a group of people, at least one will try to make it into a competition and one-up you. I'm so nervous sometimes that people think I come off as the above comment, when I just want to say that I relate to you, not that it's about me. Sometimes just saying, "Hey, that sucks, I'm sorry," seems disingenuous. So saying, "Hey, I've been there and I know how much it sucks," sounds more genuine, I think. Conversations can be weird. They refuse to take responsibility for their actions. Similarly, someone who never apologizes. It takes a little longer to figure this out, but if after a few dozen hours of interactions, you've never heard "I'm sorry," you probably never will. I waited 4.5 years once. Never again. This is one of the main things I look out for when I might be interested in someone. I pay very close attention to how they act when they make mistakes or do something that has accountability attached. If they sidestep it every time, I know to cut them off at the knees. Complaining at work to coworkers doing your work for you while you complain. When they want to dig up your dead dog to use the skull for taxidermy purposes and is insistent on doing it despite your objections. They never admit when they're wrong, even if there is physical evidence. "Well, I'm sorry that you have a problem with me. Maybe you should stop being so sensitive. Why are you making that face? I literally just apologized to you." I wonder if this is everything it appears to be because I work with the dude who has a medium autism, so we look after him and he doesn't work. He's definitely not selfish. He'll go out of his way to help people who are more vulnerable than him and always puts them at ease and gets them to open up, interact, and basically have fun and feel safe. But you can't get him to stop talking about himself or his interests. It's all football, running, football, running. Oh, have I told you about running and football? Harry Potter and that time 9 years ago when I accidentally farted? If you didn't know he was autistic, and it's actually not as apparent as you might expect, you probably would wonder why you can't get a word in edgewise. From an autistic perspective, that's probably the biggest compliment he could give you. He feels secure enough around you to talk about his interest and know that you're not going to dismiss him or make him feel bad for being excited about them. He'd likely appreciate if you gently spoke to him about keeping in mind that other people would like to talk about themselves too and their interests. And if you work together to find a balance that meant that he didn't feel ashamed, but also you could get a fair amount of speaking time in the conversation. Rejection-sensitive dysmorphia is a real issue for some of us, so make sure it's clear you're still interested in hearing about his stuff. I will say, once I learned a little bit more about autism, I definitely questioned if people have it or not when I have certain conversations, mainly online. With some of the autistic people that I have talked to, their attention to detail is insane sometimes. So much so that it can cause them to overthink a situation. For example, I was talking about comic books with this one autistic person, and they were dead serious about some errors in comic books having a significance in the book, because there was no way the company would allow that to happen. No matter how much I explained that these things happened, they just wouldn't change their mind. So I definitely take this into consideration now instead of thinking everyone online is an idiot or thick-skulled. They're surprised and disgruntled when you accept what they offered. Example, I used to be friends with someone who loved to offer stuff. I have some cute maternity clothes that would fit you. I can lend them to you if you want. I can help you rearrange your classroom. I'll come in early tomorrow. I made such a great apple pie. I can bring you a piece. These aren't things that anyone solicited. She offered them up, yet 100% expected that everyone will politely decline her offers. I'm a yes person. Anything you offer to me, I will happily accept. The look on her face when I would respond, "That would be great, thanks," was always priceless. She would never follow through with any of it, but she never stopped offering stuff, and I never stopped accepting. It was kind of hilarious. When they always play the victim card, 99% of the time, they only place themselves in the victim seat by ignoring all the efforts or costs of other people that they've had to endure and only focus on what they've had to go through themselves. I know this all too well, and when you call them out on it, you usually get hit with, "What do you mean? Where is this coming from?" Or my personal favorite, "This is all too much for me right now." Cliche answer, but I found the returning the shopping cart test to be pretty accurate. It is such a small thing, but it does tell you if a person thinks small things like that matter. This is my favorite armchair measuring of a good person. There is absolutely no benefit to you as a trolley returner, but there is a loss to other people if you don't. There's also no immediate human association like how you treat a server or retail employee. Just raw, are you thinking about the other guy? For me, it's people who listen to TikToks in public, especially in relatively silent places. There's a guy that hangs out at my favorite bar. Doesn't talk much and keeps to himself, but he sits for hours watching videos on his phone with the volume on. It's the most obnoxious thing ever. Bartender finally told him to turn the volume off or just stop watching. He was 100% oblivious to the fact that no one else in this place wanted to hear that crap. Why does it make a difference if it's a TikTok? Make it loud anything. When using your mobile on public transport, I think you should not even have key sounds. It's bad enough people don't deactivate those. Also, listening to a soccer match or whatever without bothering to use any headphones is just pure evil. I was so confused for a bit by that last comment when they said keys shouldn't have sounds. I was like, damn, you want people to silence their house keys? That's some insane entitlement right there, man. Then I realized they meant keyboard keys. My ex was insanely selfish. Her dad gave her a $20K a month allowance, plus paid for the mortgage of her penthouse in New York City, while she went to Yale. He paid her car plus insurance. She had zero need for cash. All bills are paid. He also gave her a credit card with, I'm assuming, no limit, cause we bought a car once on a whim. But I saw her steal $3 from a friend who was passed out. She'd steal panties from Walmart. She had a pile of cash in her bedroom. We once needed to pay for a delivery. I don't know if it was a bagel or pizza. but she refused to touch the pile of cash. I had to walk to my car to get cash. And when I tipped the delivery girl $10 for waiting, my ex went ballistic, calling me a B, a moron, and queer. Cause why would you give that random porky bee $10 for $5 worth of food? We went to a celeb wedding. She found a way to take 4 gift baskets as opposed to the 2 we were supposed to get. Every guest got 1. She also stole a $500 gift card to Victoria's Secret from the wedding. She was wicked greedy. One of my workmates had her drink taken from the fridge by someone else. When she put a sign up on the fridge to remind people not to take things, another guy asked her why she was doing it. She explains that her drink was taken, and without skipping a beat, he said, "Oh yeah, that's because someone took mine." So not only admitted to doing it, but his justification was that someone did it to him. So yeah, I'd say that. This is what people call paying their dues. Other people treated me poorly, so I need to perpetuate that to somehow justify it being done to me. If you don't have the same hardship, then somehow it's not fair. This is embedded to so many aspects of our society and has got to be some form of evil. The paying your dues comment is so true. At my old job, all the lifers would be so mad that I wasn't busting my balls doing extra work that wasn't in my job description. I'm not getting paid to do that extra work, so until I am, get someone in a higher position to do it. They would claim, "Young people don't know how to work anymore." Look, Grandpa, I'm sorry that I just don't bend the knee and do whatever my employer tells me to do. If the higher ups can get bonuses each year, they can afford to pay me to do more work. Trauma dumping and then not reciprocating if someone else had a bad day or felt comfortable enough to open up to them. When they go out clubbing or something and bring their friends back home to continue the party at 2 a.m. However, he lives in a share house and his roommates have to go to work in the morning. Ever since I told him to break up the party and that isn't appropriate, especially since he didn't mention to anyone that he decided to have a 2 a.m. Wednesday night party, he complied, but ever since then he's been unpleasant and unfriendly with me. Jerk. The more they ask in a relationship, the more you're having to give. That is, I think of relationships like a bridge. Generally, you should build from both sides, and in crisis you make up the difference. But a friendship is primarily meeting each other in the middle. Selfish or self-centered people pretend to build a relationship, but ask you to build the relational bridge all the way toward them. Ultimately, they expect you to build the relationship entirely towards them, and you're left giving more than receiving. When they are unable to see beyond their own needs and feelings and aren't capable of recognizing that they're impacting the people around them in negative ways. Another sign of a selfish person is when they're driven by only self-interests and don't care about how their actions might affect others. People who have kids on purpose and then act like their kids owe them, well above and beyond basic kindness and human respect, for the rest of their lives. They throw other people under the bus so fast that you get whiplash if you stand too close. Whether to save themselves or to humiliate the competition. No self-accounting at all. I love these threads. I always use them as a way to measure whether I'm doing those things or not, and fix them if I am. Made it about yourself, haven't you? You got me good. I'll end this video with a quick selfish person I used to be friends with. This guy was a master manipulator. He would reel you in with his charm and nice guy persona. He straight up offered me a chance to go to a comic convention I had always dreamed of going to. I joined his friend group, and that's when I noticed the little things he wanted people to do. He would ask people, "Are you gonna be doing this? While there, can you get this for me?" Or, "Hey, can you do this and I'll meet you there?" All these things seemed harmless and everyone helped him out because he was a nice guy. But everything was done to serve his own needs. I ended up having a falling out with this guy and was basically kicked from the friend group. Turns out everyone was extremely confused on why I was kicked out. But I found out later that he was saying some of the most messed up crap about me to this group. And basically anyone that would listen. Luckily, one of the girls in the group called BS because she was always suspicious of this guy. Months later, he kicked out another guy in the group, and that's when the girl said, "You should reach out to OP and see what really happened." We ended up getting breakfast and we kind of just said everything that was going on. Turns out this dude was bad-mouthing everyone behind their backs and was using everyone to gain something. We had an older lady in our friend group, and he would use her to jump lines at cons because she had disability access to get into things. This dude was the ultimate scumbag, and the last time I checked, he was dating a girl who, oddly enough, enjoys waiting in lines and has a history of being manipulated.
What's something a poor kid would understand, but would utterly confuse a rich kid? Waiting around in a laundromat, the ultimate example of why it's so expensive to be poor. You can't afford the initial capital of buying a washing machine, so you end up spending even more money at a laundromat over time. Watching the rest of the class go on class trips or vacations while you stay at home or at work, or even going to a school that offered this in the first place. I had no idea this was even a thing until I was in my 20s. Every time you get a little bit ahead, an extra $100 or so, and being able to relax and breathe a bit. Next day, something goes catastrophically wrong with the car or an appliance or an unexpected late charge on something you forgot about. It never ends. One step forward, two steps back. The guilt versus gratitude relationship fight you have when your friends share their food with you. Because on one hand, you never have enough money to buy enough food to be fully satiated. So that extra from your friends is awesome. But on the other hand, you understand how awful it is to not have enough food at lunch. And you don't want to put your friends in that position. Going to the library to use the internet. My mom and I often went with the car to the parking lot nearby outside with our crappy laptop to connect to the nearby unsecured Wi-Fi to be able to Skype with my grandma. It happened for about a year till she had enough money to buy a router. New means different, not unused. When you're getting new clothes, they're used from family or a thrift store. My cousins are upper middle class, and I went shopping with them during one of the only times I spent the night at their house. Not only were these 12-year-old girls astounded that my mom only gave me $10 to spend while there, they couldn't at all understand why I was checking the prices on everything we saw. Their parents just bought them whatever they wanted most of the time. My entire identity revolves around food. I use my spare fun money for food now. I give gifts of food. I take friends out to eat. I give people their favorite snacks and candy bars as little surprises. We never had enough as a kid. We went hungry every day. And now I express myself through food. I'll bring friends dinner. I'll bake people's favorites. I'll bring my coworkers entire casseroles. I'll take huge pots of soup to our neighbors. I'm getting emotional right now just thinking about how important the availability of food is to me. I have an 18-year-old coworker that doesn't eat lunch during break for our 12-hour shift. So I started packing twice as much. And I feed her the extra I bring. I just want all my friends and family to be full, to never have to feel hunger like my family did, like I did. I don't want that for them. Paying bills before the age of 18. Getting your paycheck and handing it over to your mom when you get home so the water and electricity stay on that month. Never seeing your gas tank above the midway line. Pushing oil changes until your car starts making strange grumbling noises at you. Wearing the same 2 pairs of shoes until they fall to pieces, and then visiting the thrift store for the next pair. Being freaking ecstatic that tonight mom's buying pizza for delivery because it's your only birthday wish. Don't get me wrong, I had a great childhood. My parents never let us forget that we were loved. So being poor wasn't something we really noticed, except when strangers or people at work and school treated us different for it. Buying food, not for taste or preference, but for the price point and how filling it is. There's food that tastes good because it tastes good, and then there's food that tastes good because of how affordable it is. Sugar sandwiches for dinner. Butter, sugar, and bread. We thought it was like dessert for dinner, but my mom told us recently it was because we didn't have any food. Being really young and getting excited about the power cut and lighting candles and things like that, when really it was because we couldn't afford electricity. Back in high school, I was getting flamed for having cheap shoes from Marshalls. Here's something along the lines of how it went. Those shoes are ugly. I agree. I gotta wait for my next paycheck so I can grab some new ones. Why don't you just ask your parents to buy you shoes? Because they gotta put money in more important places right now. Wait, so your parents don't buy you new shoes? Nah, I gotta save up. Cue extreme look of confusion for the kid. The confusion of the kid when he realized that most parents don't buy their kids everything they want was something I won't forget. In typical high school fashion, he then proceeded to tease me for being broke. Also, explaining to others that the only time I left my home state was for family emergencies was something that they couldn't grasp either. How bad it feels when a non-poor kid, even up to adulthood, mentions doing something expensive casually, or worse, makes a big deal about you never doing it. Things like flying, going to another country, going to Disney World, going to a hibachi restaurant or fancy steakhouse, doing camps or programs that cost money at school or during the summer. You never blank seems so confusing to them that it's true, and never crosses their mind you might feel self-conscious about it. Hint, everyone does. Knowing how to sew as a necessity. I fixed countless shirts and pants, even my couch. Everyone needs to learn this. Putting water in shampoo bottles to make it last longer. No amount of wealth that I've had has ever made me change this habit. I mean, it's just wasteful to not get that extra bit, and is less effort than opening a new bottle. I was a poor kid who was lucky enough to go to a good high school. The downside of that was growing up next to entitled brats. I've seen a girl throw her brand new gold iPhone across the room and not bat an eye because her parents would buy her a new one. Sure enough, the next time I saw her, she had one. These are the same kids that crash the new cars they get for their birthdays, get manicures, facials, and eyelashes every week despite never working a day in their lives. On the other side, I was scared when I ripped the strap off the backpack I'd been using for 4 years. I sewed it up because I didn't want to stress my mom out with having to buy a new one for me. I used it for 2 more years through college until it finally kicked the bucket and I was able to get a new one. Not getting upset when clothes, shoes, or other items are, to them, ruined. If I had a hole in my shoe, or a stain or tear on my clothes, I had to live with it, at least for a while. I knew kids in the middle and upper classes that would get chewed out for stuff like that, but their parents would usually buy them new stuff right away. That wasn't the case for a lot of kids like me because it just wasn't possible. Most of the clothes I owned were hand-me-downs to begin with. Some of it was found in the garbage. Parents borrowing birthday money to help with bills or buying food and toiletries. Love them to death. They've always worked hard for me and my sister. Every term, our school would do a thing called Scholastic Books. It's like a catalog of books and other educational things that parents can go through, pick out what they think their child would like, and order them. The school gets a percentage of the sales and the kids get an education-filled Christmas unboxing every term. Almost every kid in my class would get at least one thing, except me. I was just sitting in the back of the class watching other kids showing off their new stuff to each other. One year, a kid left before the order came in and the teacher gave his book to me. Rich kids will never know the feeling of being poor, having it noticed, and not being shamed for it. It was the only time I ever got a book from Scholastic, and I still have it. Relaxing in an empty parking lot in your friend's car is a typical night out, because nobody has anything at home and don't want to be there anyways because it's too stressful. You can't just live within your means. I think that sometimes when people say this, they're talking about poor people who spend money on alcohol and cigarettes, or that nice car they just had to have but can't really afford. I remember Jamie Oliver was criticized once for saying that a lot of British working class were just drunks who weren't interested in eating proper food, and preferred to spend their money on getting drunk in pubs. That being said, I know it's not that simple. If you haven't been poor, then you don't really understand it. The actual process of looking at something in a store and debating whether or not it's really something they need or is it something they want before trying to see if they can find a cheaper version. Coming to school stinking because your parents couldn't pay utilities that month, as if you chose to be gross. We couldn't afford cable growing up, so ergo, I didn't see a lot of movies. I often get ridiculed as a 35-year-old for not seeing them. And I always get the, "How have you not seen these?" And now it's at a point where I don't have too much of a desire to see a kid's movie for the first time from 20 years ago. I'm not really complaining, because my mom did a lot to keep my childhood together, but most of my friends don't understand that not having cable cut off access to a lot of the references they remember so fondly. Going to the mall with friends, not buying anything, not trying anything on in case you damage it, not buying any food or snacks, and making excuses why you can't go see the movie with everyone else. Saying you left your phone at home so they don't see the old flip phone or first-gen smartphone you've been passed down, and leaving quickly without saying goodbye to anyone so they don't see your mom pull up in the ancient station wagon your family's had for the last decade. What it's like to eat spaghetti for over a year and a half straight. Other than my birthday, that is exactly what I've done and am doing. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Sorry, I had to have a moment. I stressed myself out. They call it intermittent fasting by not eating breakfast, but that's pretty standard to me how I grew up. Not eating breakfast, lunch, or dinner because there was no food. According to some other people I know, it's a lack of cleanliness. Don't know if that's the right word for it. An ex-neighbor of mine, older lady, requested me specifically to help clean her property and pack her stuff when she was moving. Apparently, she asked for me because she knew I'd understand in regards to the state of her house and the yard. I mean, she was right. My family also had a bit of a white trash redneck kind of property with all the trappings. But it didn't dawn on me that other people also did it. I wouldn't expect anyone who isn't from the country or didn't live on a street in the woods with no streetlights to understand the nuances of the way a redneck yard and house looks and operates. Yes, we have a bug problem, and at least 2 defunct broken cars sitting in the grass. But I promise we're not crazy stereotypes. It's safe, I assure you. I was 7 or 8 and my rich cousin, just a few years older, screamed at me because I didn't know how to put on a seatbelt. Last time I had entered a car, I still needed a baby chair. That the next excursion with the school is too expensive to be able to go and have fun with your friends. I remember I was acting like, that's for kids, I don't go do that. But I wanted to go, I just couldn't. Or being worried about starting the school year without books because they've changed them and they're not like last year's. And you need new books, and they're very expensive. When I was a small and nimble child, my father would slip me into the vents of his client's house to scare the rats out, whereupon my siblings would be waiting to bludgeon them to death with the family soup ladles. We were a whole family of ratters. We lived rats, killed rats, and when times were tough, ate rats too. Driving with the check engine light on all the time. Can't get a new car, can't get it fixed, but have to take it to get to work so you can make rent. Just drive and hope it doesn't stall or blow up. The take a penny, leave a penny honor system. I was a cashier at a gas station for many years. The people taking the change from the take/leave cup have hundreds sticking out of their wallet. The ones who actually need them will stand there checking every pocket and corner of their purse, run out to check under their car seat before accepting the change, and they come back to pay it the next day. How hard life really is, and that money 100% can buy happiness. The whole money can't buy happiness thing is just something the rich tell the poor to keep them placated. Money gets you financial security and products, which in turn makes you happy. Money can certainly buy happiness. Expiration dates are more like suggestions than fact. They have to set them earlier than they actually expect the food to expire so as to avoid complaint. Had a roommate throw out all of my and my other roommate's food because it was a week before the expiration date. She honestly didn't understand why we were livid. She thought she was helping. Learning skills to make do with what you have. I remember not having very much money growing up and needing to learn lots of computer and network related troubleshooting skills because I couldn't rely on my parents simply to buy a new computer or update the modem or router. We couldn't simply pay to have ISP technicians come out all the time, and my parents couldn't afford the time off to address those types of issues. Being afraid of going to the doctor or dentist. This isn't stemming from being afraid of needles or getting teeth pulled, but more for a concern of whether or not something that was found would be sufficiently covered by insurance, and weighing that against whether or not you truly feel bad. I remember having a really weak immune system at a certain point when I was 16 years old, and not wanting to go to the doctors until the pain was too unbearable. Turned out that I had shingles. Yes, I'm aware that it's extremely uncommon for someone that young to have, but yes, I did in fact get diagnosed with shingles, and I'm not mistaking it for something else. There was also a time where finals were approaching during my 3rd year in my major, when I was feeling some pain in my abdomen and reading up on my symptoms. I foolishly decided that my self-diagnosis was sufficient and stayed home to tough out what I suspected to be a kidney stone, rather than see a doctor, because I figured that they'd expect me to pass it on my own anyway. I ended up passing the kidney stone halfway through finals week. As someone who grew up in an environment that disincentivized the usage of healthcare, I really have to be mindful to make full use of it now that I'm older, and maintaining my health matters more. It's crazy how much small things matter when you're poor, and how little thought you're able to put into them if you're financially stable. Saving trash. Rich people don't bother with food scraps or the boxes things came in, because why would you store trash in your fridge or closet instead of getting rid of it now? One thing I don't think people understand is that being poor in an urban area sucks, but I'd argue in many ways, being poor in a rural area sucks even more. In my adult life, since I've escaped from the poor forgotten town I grew up in, I've met a lot of other people who grew up poor also. And the ones from larger areas, the story is like, oh, thank God we had things like the local Y or whatever after school tutoring program for poor kids, or teach music in the ghetto type stuff. And it's like, well, we didn't have any of that. You were just dirt poor, and no one knew your town even existed or gives a crap about it. So yeah, that's one thing I've heard from even other former poor kids. They'll ask things like, what community programs did you go to? Or something like that. And I have to explain, hey, we didn't even have that. We were just all poor out in the boonies with nothing around. And even our own state government pretended that part of the state doesn't exist. In the US, in February, you get better stuff than Christmas when the income tax check hits. We'd get new shoes and have cable for a couple of months. Even McDonald's. You don't ever get ice in your fast food drinks. You get less soda and you don't need your drink to stay cold if you drink it fast, since they keep it cold in the fountain dispenser. Cooking everything, including pizza, from scratch, because restaurants and pre-made food are too expensive. On the rare occasion food was purchased from a restaurant, it was either because my father was out of town, or we were buying the leftover cold chicken, not the freshly cooked hot chicken from the local chicken shack. Group daycare. All of the poorer kids in my elementary school all went to the same group daycare when they were preschool. Kids with richer parents either had a stay-at-home parent or had their own personal babysitter. Fruit juice, even the fake kind, is a luxury. Boxed mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs baked into it is a fine casserole. Salvation Army sells prom dresses that are in great shape. Duct tape on shoes isn't just a fashion statement, it's a necessity. Space heaters are for when your gas utility gets cut off, and all the windows are open because the electricity got cut off and we need the light in the house. There are more, but that's a pretty comprehensive list from me. Navigating higher education when your parents didn't go to college. So much of your success in college is based on your ability to utilize on-campus resources, and meeting with faculty and staff about opportunities and for assistance. That all wasn't totally obvious to me, and I feel like it really inhibited my success in school. I remember having to turn down an offer for an internship in DC because it was unpaid, and I didn't know there was an office at school that would help find funding to live there. Getting the financial aid office and the financial service office confused on a regular basis and feeling super stupid because of it is also a fond memory. Doing all your own work on your house and learning how to do all this work on your own. Bathroom leak? Dad needs to learn how to do basic plumbing. Need to do some basic wiring? Dad needs to learn basic electrical. Need to add a new addition to the house? Dad learns basic carpentry. Need the roof reshingled? Dad learns how to reshingle a roof. Broken window? Dad learns how to install new glass or replace an entire window. By the time I was 12, I was learning how to do carpentry, mechanics, wiring, plumbing, construction, landscaping, metalwork, welding, building, renovations, and repairing. I learned how to drive a truck at 13, tractor at 14, and heavy equipment at 18. By the time I was 20, I could fix and maintain anything in my own house. By the time I was 30, I could literally build an entire house and everything that goes with it on my own. I wasn't the best, the fastest, or the most efficient, but I could do just about anything with my own hands. I grew up in a remote native community where we had no easy access to construction workers, plumbing, electricians, or mechanics. We had to learn how to do all these things on our own. It's amazing what you can learn to do when you're forced to. Getting excited about being able to have McDonald's. We used to be so poor, my two sisters and I were practically giddy that we were able to share 2 Happy Meals between us 3 and my mom. Otherwise, it was soup kitchen and discount food. Coupons. I have a friend that's really rich and I love this show that's all about couponing, and she asked what a coupon was. I was shocked. Watching your mom push food away to you or your dad, even though she was still hungry. Also, your parents sacrificing their health for yours. We didn't have low-income healthcare, and while I always got proper medical care, my parents did without. I grew up in communism, and let me tell you, Romania in the 1980s would confuse most of you. Hot water stopped running after 9 p.m. No hot water between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. the next day. Hot water between 6 to 8 a.m. and 3 to 9 p.m. on most days except Saturday and Sunday. We did not have 2 days off every weekend. We went to school Monday through Saturday. Every second day, I would wake up at 5:45 and be in line at a shop about 500 miles away from my house to buy milk. The queue would be variable, but some days the milk would finish before I got a chance to buy it. Shops did not have milk, butter, fresh bread, or any of the basics. At random times in the evening, electricity would turn itself off, and sometimes it stayed off for hours. This was part of our dictator's plan to save energy. It got so bad that as a med student, because I had to study for exams and refused to do it by candlelight, I made a chart with times and regions where electricity was cut for about a month. Then I would make sure not to be in that neighborhood when electricity was expected to be cut. So I ended up visiting people who had electricity so I could study. Luckily, they understood and left me alone. I saw a banana for the first time at age 23. I sat in line for 4 hours to buy oranges outdoors in freezing temperatures. To enter the US Embassy in Romania in 1992, I had to line up for 18 hours. Need I continue?
What stories do you rarely tell because nobody will believe you? I'm a living witness to something known as the McMasterville explosion. CIL, the paint company, made explosives. Their explosives factory, which was a giant factory on the same grounds as the paint-making factory. One night, the whole thing blew up. I was looking right at it when it went. Not just the explosives, but thousands of gallons of flammable liquids from other parts of the factory all went up at once. It was estimated to have the power of a 1 kiloton explosion. I lived on the side of a mountain called Mount St. Hilaire, a little over a mile away looking down at the factory site. When you see an explosion like that from a distance, the land ripples like water, like when you drop a stone in water. I was riding a bike. The ground shook me first, then the air blast knocked me on my butt. The factory was deliberately sunk into the ground and surrounded by a high trench wall in case it ever blew up so the nearby town of Beloil wouldn't get leveled. So the explosive force got punched into the ground and the factory was blown straight up into the air. Tons of wreckage rained down for miles. No one I know of was hit by anything, but many small fires were started all over the place. My next-door neighbor found a train wheel in his backyard, and it was red hot when he found it. Apparently, this occurred in 1972, and at least 6 people died.
That my father was arrested for stealing $100,000 worth of Hershey's Kisses, and during his time in jail I found out that he was not my biological father. My biological father owned a chain of restaurants that I frequented as a kid and teenager. I found all this out a few weeks after my 18th birthday.
What would you even want with $100,000 worth of Hershey's Kisses?
I was 6 years old and my parents took my family down to Disney World. Yay! On the flight down, the pilot made an announcement that if you looked out the window, you could see the space shuttle launching. It was kind of far away, but I could definitely see it in a plume of smoke. Very cool. We land in Orlando, and everyone is dead silent, glued to the TVs. It was the Challenger, and it exploded on launch. I saw the Challenger explode.
The 28th of January, 1986. I faked playing a xylophone for 2 years so I could go to China once. I played trombone for 8 years through middle and high school, and I knew a few people at my college before I went there. They convinced me to join marching band, but were always complaining that the band director wrote impossible drills, 10 counts to move, 30 yards in some instances, run through the bass drums, that sort of crap. I, being the genius that I was, figured, well, I played keyboard in a ska band for a couple years. How hard could xylophone be? Xylophones don't march after all. Answer: xylophone is pretty goddamn hard, and I'd never played one in my life before the first day of band camp, which is when the auditions were. The guy doing the auditions was the percussion instructor for the College of Music, and after my audition, he told me to put the mallets down, step back, and never play xylophone again, which, to be fair, I did butcher the crap out of hot cross buns due to some sort of administrative mess-up. They never got around to actually kicking me out that year, and I hung around and pretended to play the xylophone. Now, every 2 years, my college's marching band takes a big trip somewhere overseas to perform and yada yada yada, and I had entered on an off year. The second year, I show up and do the same thing, except the percussion instructor has been fired. I never really dealt with him beyond defending him with my ability to butcher xylophone music, but to my understanding, he was a general butthole and the music department had been wanting to chuck him out for some time, so they made a big stink about him doing some paperwork incorrectly or something. So it was left to our section leaders to audition the section, and being good friends with the section leader, he just said, "Jenkins, hit something every now and again, but not very hard and make it look like you're playing," so that's what I did. I found the softest mallet in the place, barely tapped the keys, wham, bam, going to China. Everything would have worked out peachy. Except our band director also didn't pay any attention to the orchestra pit. So when he was doling out parts for the music we were going to play in China, he assigned me to concert bells. Like that tiny little 50-pound xylophone that has a sound that would cut through an aerial bombardment. Not only that, I had a solo at the beginning of The Moon Represents My Heart, which, as it was explained to me, is basically Somewhere Over the Rainbow for Chinese people. Everybody knows the song. It's a cultural treasure and not something you want to mess up at a national landmark because folks will notice. So I busted my butt actually learning how to play that bit over the span of a couple months and managed to avoid offending the people of Shanghai and Beijing. Not all the people, though. A group of Chinese youths caught me urinating into a bush in Shanghai's club district, and I had to duck into a place called Highway 3 with my dinger still hanging out to get away from them. Got to play a set of concert bells on the Great Wall and see a whole bunch of stuff in China, though. It's ridiculous to me that seemingly no one who was ever in charge of this marching band really had any clue what the hell they were doing, or what was going on really with this band. When I was 19, some friends and I were visiting New York City. After picking them up from the airport, we decided it would be fun to drive down Broadway at night and see it all lit up. It was fun. We got some good pictures from the car, and around 8:30 we decided to drive home. Going northbound on the West Henry Hudson, we were talking and listening to some Journey when someone hopped the highway divider and ran out in front of my car, stopped, and looked right at us. There was no time to stop, no time to swerve, and at 50 miles per hour, he came crashing straight through the front windshield, hitting my best friend directly in the face. Immediately, I pulled over and called the police, then went to look to see if there were any slim chances the man might still be alive. I saw his legs swerved roughly 4 to 6 inches above the knee and on the road near where my car had stopped. My friend in the back seat was crying her eyes out, and my buddy was amped up on adrenaline and shock in the front seat waiting for the police to arrive and remove him from the car. Walking further back, I saw a bunch of people who had stopped to help crowded around the man. I saw his head caved in and a dark pool underneath him, before a kind old gentleman turned me away, saying, "You don't need to see this." In almost no time at all, the fire department was there helping my friend who had a broken nose and shards of glass embedded in his eye and face out of the car. When the ambulance arrived, they tried to pull him in with the man I had hit, which made him freak out and refuse and wait for another ambulance. The cops on the scene took down my story and ran a breathalyzer on me, but I hadn't been drinking. At this time in my life, I didn't drink. Then put my friend from the back seat and I in the back of a car to try and calm us down while they waited for the investigators to arrive. I had called my mom, who lived outside the city, to tell her I had been in an accident and that she should come for support. After about an hour, the investigators arrived, took time marking off the scene, and interviewed us again about what had happened. The police were very nice and all of us were in shock. After interviewing me, I asked the investigator where I could go to the bathroom. He nodded to the trees on the side of the highway and said to have at it. So I stood on the dimly lit bloody highway near the trees and under the watchful eye of the 50-block traffic jam I had created, and let forth a stream I had been holding for hours. Afterwards, they took us back to the local precinct to finish paperwork and meet up with my mom and sister who were waiting there, after having left my stepbrother with my friend who had been taken to the hospital. They had gotten lost and caught in the same traffic I caused, which is why they didn't meet us at the scene. With the paperwork done, my mom asked what had happened to the man. The officer looked at my little sisters and then asked my mom and I to step outside. It was DOA. He had been released from prison that morning. I was shocked when he extended his hand to me and thanked me for helping to clean up the city. After going to the hospital to get my friend and stepbrother, we went home for the evening. The next day, when we picked up my car from the auto shop, I saw the meager sunlight, the after image of what had transpired, blood and brain matter all over the front of my car, an imploded front windshield, and entering the car to take it to a place to get the glass repaired, a large chunk of bloody skull in the passenger seat next to me, hidden under some napkins. My friend who had been in the passenger seat wandered over and I told him not to look inside, but he wouldn't listen and did anyway. I think that is when the reality of what happened sunk in for him, because his eye grew large and he turned around silently to go sit in my mom's car. The entire experience was completely surreal, especially during the drive to get the windshield repaired when alone I drove the car to the shop, the wind whistling through the broken glass. I want to believe that when the cops said, "Thanks for cleaning up the city," the guy who died was maybe just a real piece of work and did some awful stuff, but maybe this dude is just completely indifferent about this stuff, which is pretty horrible. My other thought is that this individual also enjoys creative writing. TLDR, almost had a knife to my brain because of some crazy quack doctor leaping to very rash conclusions. Don't you hate it when doctors jump to conclusions? I know I've posted this somewhere before, but anyway. I was 10, lived out in rural America where my closest neighbor was a football field's length away. Between us was an overgrown field that backed up to my neighbor's horse pasture. I used to run through the fields full blast with weeds and grass stalks and wildflowers that were taller than me. I didn't give a crap. So one morning I wake up and something isn't right. I have this horrible pain in my neck. My neck! Oh God, what happened to my neck? My neck was swollen to the point of it jutting past my chin. It was like a 350-pound person's neck on a little 90-pound girl. I screamed. Mom screamed when she saw it. We took off for the pediatrician right away. Of course, as fate would have it, my usual pediatrician wasn't in that day, so a stand-in was there. I remember very mild tests going on, nothing too crazy, before the doctor explains to my mother that it's a brain tumor and I'll have to have brain surgery right away. I am freaking out, and my mom isn't too calm either. She, however, rationalizes, and before she makes her plans to have them cut into my skull, takes me to her own doctor for a second opinion. The RN at that office peers at me for a minute, performs a few other mild tests, and then goes, aha, and lifts up my ponytail. She points at this small bump on the back of my neck and proudly exclaims, spider bite. 2 days rest and some penicillin and I was 100% again. That was a pretty crazy conclusion to come to after it's like, well, when did the lump show up? Just this day. Then again, what kind of crazy spider bite was it? Around the age of 12, I was diagnosed with severe OCD. I struggled with it so much that I had psychiatrists say they could do no more for me. A therapist that made house calls, and I've even participated in studies, evaluated on the other side of a one-way mirror kind of stuff. Perhaps in desperation, my parents eventually sent me to a psychiatric hospital halfway across the country which specialized in the treatment of OCD. I was there for 3 months until my insurance ran out. Now I'm 22 years old and I've overcome it so much that nobody besides family even realizes anything is/was ever wrong with me. With all these people running around saying I'm so OCD, I eat my M&Ms one color at a time, and them not knowing me back then, I don't even bother divulging a part of my life they would be unable to comprehend the severity of. You know, I totally get that. As someone with ADHD who used to get support of it when I was a kid, and I used to see these people and they'd say to me things like, so, is your ADHD better now? Is it gone yet? And I go, well, I don't think it works like that. I absolutely hated those meetings, but my point is those issues, mental disorders, learning difficulties never really go away. You simply learn to adjust your life around it and behave accordingly in certain situations, and people often don't talk about that much. I'm late to the thread, so this will probably get buried, but hey, I feel like telling the story. It's a bit spooky. Hopefully someone will find it a good read. My mom and I moved into a completely normal/average house when I was about 15. Everything was fine. We loved it. One day I was home sick from school and I was messing around on the computer when I heard our garage door open. I freaked out and went down the hall to get my mobile phone and saw the hallway door that connects to the garage opening. I panicked and yelled, "Get out!" and 2 young boys slammed the door and ran off. I started crying and called my mom. I don't know why I didn't call the police first, who told me to go next door to my neighbors and she was going to come home from work. When she got home, she was speaking to my neighbor for a bit. She, the neighbor, ended up telling us that she thought it was probably the young boy that lived in the house before us. Apparently, he sometimes goes around to everyone's houses and breaks in and eats their food and watches TV and stuff. And for whatever reason, they were all okay with that. Apparently, he came from some sort of broken home and they all felt sorry for him, so they didn't call the police. Mom and I were completely unsettled by that and put new locks on all the doors that week. We didn't care if the other neighbors were okay with that. We weren't. A few months pass and nothing ever happens again. We figure he knows we're not cool with his weirdness and doesn't try to break in again. A week or so later, I'm in bed asleep and I wake up in the middle of night for no reason at all. I'm not hot or cold. I don't need to pee. I didn't have a nightmare. I just woke up. I had this incredibly uneasy and weird feeling wash over me. I felt like something or someone was watching me and I got completely freaked out. I went into my mom's room and slept in her bed that night. It kept happening a few nights and I thought I was just having nightmares or was getting scared of the dark for some reason. I ended up sleeping in my mom's bed for about a week because I got so legit scared of the dark now. I finally worked up the courage to sleep in my own bed one night, but I could barely sleep. I felt totally uneasy, nervous, nervous, scared. I got to sleep for a bit, but then I woke up again. I looked outside my window and I could swear I saw a face/figure of someone standing there. Obviously, I noped the hell out and ran back to my mom. One of the nights I was back in her bed. We were all asleep and feeling fine when I woke up to my dog on the end of the bed growling. Now, our dog is an old golden retriever and has never growled or barked at anything. She is a huge wuss and completely placid. She has no problem with strangers, even if someone knocks on the door and comes in. She couldn't care less. So I wake up all dazed, confused, and half asleep. I hear the dog growling and I'm asking her, what's wrong? I look up from the bed and I am not lying to you. There is a man standing in the doorway with a knife. I screamed like a banshee and the dog started barking at this point. Mom woke up and saw the man too. He went running down the hallway and out the back door. I'm crying my eyes out. The dog is barking her face off and Mom is frantically trying to call the police. An hour later, they finally get here and of course, the dude is gone. Morning comes and we go outside to see that the back gate has had its lock cut with bolt cutters and the door leading into the house had been smashed in. The cops come in and dust for prints and leave crap everywhere, but at the end of the day, they can't and don't do anything. We moved out that same day and went to live with my grandmother and grandfather until we found a new house. Pretty much no one in the family believed us or thought we were just making it up for attention. My family are buttholes. A few weeks later, we get a call from the police and they managed to match the prints to some teenager who just got arrested for breaking into another house. It's the same guy that was breaking into all the houses in the neighborhood and used to live in the house we were in. So Mom's talking to the cops and some of the neighbors when suddenly someone tells us completely casually, "Oh yeah, that's the Millet kid." Wait, did they just say Millet? Yeah, pretty much any Australian will know this last name. Ivan Millet, the serial killer. His nephew was breaking into people's homes and our home while we were sleeping with a knife, and people were okay with that. So anyway, we move into a new house and forget all about it until a year ago. Millet's nephew gets 43 years jail sentence. He and his friend murdered another teenager in the same goddamn place his uncle dumped all those bodies. WTF. So, the guy that broke into our house watched me while I was asleep and stood in our bedroom doorway with a knife while we were sleeping, actually murdered another teenager a few years later. Mom and I nearly fell over when we heard about it. No one really believes us, which really annoys me, but it really happened. Sometimes when I think back on what could have happened if I slept in my own bed that night, or if the dog didn't bark, or if we were never woken up, it really freaks me out. It's also left me with a huge fear of the dark. I get really uneasy if I have to go outside at night by myself or if I wake up in the middle of the night. Well, goddamn, I'm English and even I know who Ivan Millet is. But that is a legitimately terrifying story. I went to college at Belmont University in Nashville from 1999 until 2002. While I was there, I worked for record labels, as did a lot of friends who were all in the music business program. Well, one buddy worked for a label called Red Hill Records as an intern/gopher/indentured servant. So on occasion, we could go to events and meet industry people and artists, as this was a small label. They had an artist that we became friends with named Katie Hudson, who was a singer-songwriter at about 17 years old. We hung out all the time since we were just 18 ourselves and had nothing to do but study and bum around coffee shops. As our friendship developed, my roommate developed a huge crush on her. She never seemed to reciprocate the feeling, so I asked her what was wrong with him. You know, trying to be a good friend. And she revealed that she liked me instead of him. So, since I wanted to be a good friend, I had to turn her down because of his feelings for her. That girl went on to be Katy Perry. I kid you not. I suppose that's pretty impressive. I'm not really a Katy Perry person, but good for this guy. And while I'm not going to read them, some of the follow-up comments are pretty cringe. My friend's father owned a Mercedes CLS when I was a senior in high school. One day when his father is gone, we take it out. We have some ganja in both of our grinders in the cup holders, which was freaking stupid. We always put that stuff in the trunk. As we approach a downsloped hill near our school in the most cliche manner possible, he decides he wants to show me how fast his dad's car can go. The road was narrow and the slope was pretty steep downwards, but went right back up after it reached the bottom. He books it, and by the time we reach the bottom of the hill, we're probably going 90 miles per hour. Right at the bottom, we pass a cop, like frickin' fly right by him. He turns his lights on and tries to turn around, but one or two cars gets between us and him. The road was so narrow that he had to do like a 3-point turn to get all the way around. We start to frickin' panic. I have no idea what came over me at this point. Only about 3 seconds after we see the cop, but seeing that it took him so long to turn around made me look at my friend and say, keep going. We go to the top of the hill, still going fast AF, take a right, go about 100 yards and take a left into a neighborhood. We go down a random driveway in a cul-de-sac park and turn the car off. We chuck all of the ganja materials out of the car and slump down in our chairs, peeking back. We see the cop go around the cul-de-sac and leave the neighborhood. I swear to God, it was like the goddamn Italian Job. Never been so scared in my life. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. My mom thought Paul McCartney kidnapped me. My mom was walking with me on the beach in the Hamptons when I was an infant. McCartney came up to my mom and asked if he could hold me. My mom was in desperate need of the bathroom and didn't want to go inside with me, so she asked if McCartney wouldn't mind watching me for a few minutes. Apparently, I started sobbing, so he paced up and down the beach and my mom couldn't find me when she came out of the bathroom. She called my dad and they spent 2 hours looking for me before they found McCartney sitting on a bench chair with me in his arms. I don't care if the baby's crying. You stand exactly where I left you with my baby. If someone trusts you with their baby, you don't move an inch. This may get buried and not be as interesting as some of the others, but I have one that nobody ever believes. When I was in 4th grade, I was completely obsessed with Chuck Berry. I mean, religiously obsessed. I still am to a certain extent, but that was back in the day when I was first discovering rock and roll. Well, as fortune would have it, Chuck Berry came to my city to perform at the local venue. He must have been in his 70s at this point. I was beyond excited, so of course, my mother, being the caring and loving parent that she is, bought tickets and we went. The whole entire show, I was in the very front, and then I had an idea. I didn't know if it could possibly work or not, but there was a pause, and I went for it. While Chuck was tuning his guitar, I started yelling, "Mr. Berry, Mr. Berry!" To my absolute bewilderment, he leaned in from the stage and with a huge grin on his face asked me, "What's up, little buddy?" To which I replied, "Can I please sing Johnny Be Good with you?" Holy crap, he says yes. I'm a 4th grader on stage at a huge venue with the father of rock and roll about to sing one of his most famous songs with him. He starts the opening riff. I'm shaking, but not from stage fright. No, it was from sheer shock of being in this situation. I start singing. The crowd erupts. I bellow out the song. At the end, Chuck asks me, "What's your name, young man?" I tell him my name. The crowd starts cheering my name for a solid minute. It was the most incredible feeling and hands down the best gift I've ever received. Now, personally, I'm more of a fan of Maybelline, why can't you be true? Oh, Maybelline, why can't you be true? You just started doing the things you used to do.
What's the worst damage you've caused? I myself may not have caused that much material damage, but a friend of mine told me the other day how one late night he drove a van into a parking garage in a hotel in Barcelona and got stuck under the roof. Upon reversing the car, all of the roof tiles on that level came down in a chain reaction. They buried all the cars that were parked on that level. Obviously, nobody could leave the next morning, which resulted in a lot of compensation claims for missed flights and business meetings, besides all the damage that was done to the garage and many cars. It took a bunch of lawyers and insurance companies 4 years to get it all sorted out. There was a house for sale in my neighborhood that was empty for about 3 months. During that period, a group of friends and I pushed a huge freaking boulder into the deep end of the swimming pool. To be clear, it was poised right on the edge, begging to be pushed. Fast forward after a few months, a friend not involved in the incident tells me that his dad just bought a new house. Only downside is the new house has a boulder in the pool. Oops. Your friend's dad has terrible taste in real estate. He lives in a goddamn boulder stuck in a pool? I erected a tower crane with the base that was improperly engineered. 2 months later, it fell, collapsing one building, damaging 2 others, killing 1 man, injuring the operator, and shutting down the job. I think the ballpark financial end was around $20 million in damages, and it's all undisclosed. I wasn't the reason that there was a failure, but that damage was ridiculous. Trip to Spain with my high school. Beer plus dishwashing soap plus giant fountain in the middle of a town equals chaos. They closed the 4 main roads the next day. They brought in a fire truck from a neighboring town just to clean up the bubbles. Local newspaper blamed it on American tourists. We were Canadian. It freaking blows me away that nobody has done this to the Grand Haven musical fountain yet, which is the size of a football field. On a side note, I did this to our hot tub back when I was a teen. and then blamed it on the neighbor kid. Freaking bubbles everywhere. Clear out to the driveway. Took about 5 times of draining the hot tub to get all the bubbles to stop. I live in GH, and I'm sure it would be absolutely crazy if done right. From what I've heard though is that they have guys up by the pumps when the show is going to keep an eye on things. I'd imagine it would be difficult to pull off successfully. Actually, it would be very possible. You are right. We do have someone on the hill and someone in the stadium. If someone were to dump soap in it, the show would still go on. It has only been canceled like 3 times in 48 years of operation. Plus, we would most likely not notice the soap until it was too late. The nozzles aerate the water too, so the bubbles would be out of control. It just blows me away that no pranksters have tried this. But I am glad at the same time because cleanup would be hell. I think I've done this in my sink when I wash dishes. When I was 11 or 12, I went to visit my sister in Germany. We were getting ready for a dinner party that she was throwing later that night. So we were busily getting the final items we needed at the local market. It was a bit hectic. As it was a little market, they only had these tiny baskets for all of your stuff, and no carts. So she asked me to hold a bottle of champagne. As we were waiting in line, I was being a stupid kid and trying to balance the bottle on the punt, the little divot on the bottom of the bottle, on one finger. Naturally, I screwed it up and dropped the bottle. Anyone who's ever dropped a bottle of champagne knows those things explode with force and a lot of noise. This, in a foreign country, is embarrassing enough as is. But then this guy next to me cries out and collapses on the ground, clutching his knee. Blood is squirting all over the floor and making a big pool. This lady starts screaming and I just stand there not knowing what the hell happened. Turns out a shard of glass had got under the guy's kneecap and severed an artery and some ligaments. He ended up having to go to the hospital that day and have surgery. The cherry on top? Dude was a mountain climber and he was leaving to climb the Matterhorn the next day. My jaw was literally left open after reading this. I think I would hate all children if this happened to me. I used to work at a major appliance warehouse in the summer, and during my first month as a forklift operator, I came around the corner too sharp. The clamp of my lift caught the edge of a refrigerator. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The entire stack, about 60 feet high, of 10 $1,000 fridges came crashing down on top of my lift and into a subsequent stack of dishwashers. I was terrified. As the second tower came crashing down, I could hear employees screaming, "Oh no, oh no, oh yeah!" And all the other lift operators came out to watch and laugh at the damages. I proceeded to take the walk of shame to inform the damages manager. Rather than fire me, we all took hunting pictures of me holding up dead dishwashers. Estimated damage, $20,000. I've always thought you have to hit those shelves pretty hard to cause that much damage to knock them over. I used to work at a big warehouse store and these things are usually bolted to the ground. Also, one of our shelves even had a huge dent in it and it didn't fall over. Not sure how that was allowed to fly, just for safety reasons alone. My little brother and I saw someone make and use a Molotov cocktail in some action movie. We thought it would be the coolest thing ever and determined that we could do the same thing and be little action heroes. Our first attempt yielded disappointing results. Somehow, we neglected to realize that bottles had to be made of glass. Once that was sorted out, we tested our new creation on a big oak tree in the clearing about a mile into a forest behind our house. The bottle full of gasoline exploded just like we expected and burned that 100-foot-old oak tree down in less than an hour. We were amazed, but soon became terrified when the flaming limbs began falling off the tree and setting fire to the tall, dry summer grass nearby. The fire quickly spread to nearby trees and we did the only thing we could think of to do: run like hell. That inferno burned for about the next 48 hours until the fire department could finally put it out. It destroyed about 40 acres of forest land, an abandoned house, a part of a horse farm, resulting in some freaked out horses and lots of charred fences. Naturally, we never came forward because we were cowardly little jerks. But we both went to volunteer for fire departments wherever we lived to atone for our stupidity and carelessness. In high school, we used to go out to my friend's farm and attempt totally awesome fire-based destruction every weekend. Our experiment with Molotovs began with my friend setting his jacket on fire by pouring fuel down the back while he was trying to throw one incorrectly. Being set on fire helps people learn. I can't say that I ever messed with fire when I was younger, outside of the occasional fireworks, but when I hear stories about people doing stuff like this, it just makes me wonder, Where the hell were your parents? I accidentally blew up a 6,000-gallon tanker truck and demolished the workshop we were in. Damages amounted to about $120,000. Go on. I worked for a company in England that built and repaired tanker trucks. A 4-part compartment truck came in one day for the pipework to be replaced on the rear compartment. I had been told that the tanker was clean and vapor-free, safe to work on. I got under the rear of the truck to cut the bolt head off the bottom connecting flange with an acetylene torch. As I cut the last bolt, the flange gap opened up about 1/8, and a ring of flame came out. Before I had time to react, the rear compartment blew up, which blew out the division into the next compartment, and that exploded. All 4 compartments went off within milliseconds of each other, and the front of the tanker blew up and destroyed the truck unit. Luckily, the driver wasn't inside. The top of the tank opened up like petals of a flower, and the whole truck jumped in the air. The explosion took the roof off the top of the workshop and the supporting wall that the truck was parked next to. I was actually in the safest place, which was underneath, although I did have to change my undies. Turns out the tank hadn't been cleaned and had just came from dropping off a load. I needn't tell you that that was the last time we ever accepted a vehicle without a vapor-free certification. My father once sold a tanker truck that exploded during a pressure test. Killed a guy, sent shrapnel flying into their brand new test building. He was livid, and he couldn't figure out how the tanker exploded at 10 bar. Turns out the guy who bought it decided that he could get the truck all the way to the test center so it could bring him a few extra bucks, and he used it to deliver gas in a nearby test center. He didn't empty it with water afterwards. Gas plus oxygen equals bang. My friend worked in a seaweed concentrate factory. One of their machines is a big centrifuge, and one day, while spinning really fast, it decided to disintegrate. The machine exploded into 100 fragments of steel, which flew off into random directions, punching holes in the warehouse walls, and one embedded itself in his locker as he was running away from the carnage. Some folks are just lucky. This was one of my biggest fears when I used to work at an old automotive factory job. We had a lot of dudes that didn't pay attention to their test stands, and at any moment something could break off and cause serious damage. I experienced a couple of fires while I was there. Luckily, we caught them in time. When I was in the 6th grade, I caught a dried up tobacco field on fire. I had a knockoff of one of those Rambo knives, and for a few days I was high on the thought of being an action hero with nothing but my knife, and all the crap stuffed inside the handle. I was trying to show my sister how I could create fire with using just 2 sticks. When she wasn't looking, I snuck out a match and started a small fire, blew out the match and tossed it behind me. Of course, while we were staring at my small, deliberate fire, flames were rapidly spreading all around us. This was right off a busy highway, and suddenly there were folks all over the place swatting the fire with their floor mats. In the end, a huge chunk of the field was completely charred, and to this day, my entire family believes I was able to accomplish all of that by rubbing 2 sticks together. When my brother and I were 4 and 5 respectively, we were being little devils and refusing to go to bed when we were put there. My parents eventually gave up and just went to bed. They were exhausted as they had a dinner party that evening. I promptly went into the lounge and got out my parents' entire cassette tape collection, including the memoirs of my grandmother's escape from Germany in 1939, and proceeded to pull out all of the tape from the cassettes and play with it. My brother, in the meantime, decided that he was hungry and that he wanted a fried egg. In his 5-year-old wisdom, he got out an egg and a frying pan and put them on the stove and turned on an element. Nothing happened with the element that he was looking at, so he turned on another one. This time the heat turned on, and once the pan was hot enough, he started to fry his egg. Unfortunately, the first element he turned on had a wooden chipper board on it, which smoldered until the heat reached my mom's food processor, which promptly started burning and melting. This resulted in a lot of black smoke and fire. My brother toddled down to my parents' bedroom and said, "Daddy, why is there smoke in the kitchen?" And apparently my dad went from horizontal in bed to vertical and halfway down the corridor in about 2 seconds flat. The fire was quite easily put out at the expense of my parents' nice crockery that was soaking in the bucket nearby. My dad just picked it up, threw it, plates, water, and all, on the fire. In the photos of the damages that had to be taken for insurance purposes, there's a sort of twisted black mess of a stove and bench area, and then right in the middle of all of it is a perfectly cooked fried egg. I'm just interested to know if they were able to save those cassette tapes, because losing that Escape from Germany tape must be devastating. Once while I was in college, there was this cute girl I asked to talk to. On the day results came in, I saw her sitting crying. She failed her papers and would probably be sent back. I went and checked the results. It seemed that she had passed. I ran back to her with the good news. She was very happy. We went back to check the results together. To my horror, I realized I had made a mistake earlier and she had really failed. I was speechless when she boarded the bus in tears. This story is interesting because not all damage needs to be monetary. While in college, I spent several summers working in a salmon cannery in Alaska, and for a few seasons, worked on the overnight cleaning crew. These huge industrial revolution looking behemoths that cut salmon into pieces and put them in cans. The final stage of cleaning these involved climbing into the cavity under the machine where the blade assemblies normally sat. It was removed nightly for sharpening. We used thin wire picks about 12 inches long to get any last fish parts out of the machine. Inside the cavity was a big drive arm that drove the part of the machine that fed the fish to the blades. This arm sat right across your chest as you worked in the cavity, and made for a handy shelf if you needed to set down your pick for a minute. Of course, one day I left my pick on the drive arm. The line mechanic came in and installed the blade assembly, which consisted of about 16 circular blades about 3 times the diameter of a basketball, and which rotated at a ridiculously high RPM as the machine ran. So the mechanic turns on the machine only to hear a god-awful screeching sound as the pick was fed into the blades. It wiped out about half of the blades on the assembly, and with no suitable backup, I took out a quarter of the plant's production capacity for the day. And this was a plant that processed 1 million pounds of very perishable fish per day. The head mechanic who heroically got this thing repaired by the next day pitched me a lot of crap, but never ratted me out. Homemade bomb when I was 9 years old. This all happened with my grandparents' black powder that he used to refill his shotgun shells, a battery-powered clock, a drilled-out light bulb, also battery-powered with a short fuse that attached to an element and duct taped to a 3-foot-wide oak tree. Huge explosion destroying the tree and setting fire to the field behind a nursing home. Tried to put out the fire with my jacket, which resulted in me fanning the flame. State police, helicopters, and fire trucks arrived at the scene. My grandfather smelt the fire on my clothes and dragged my butt out there to fess up to what had happened. Ain't doing that crap again. Lesson freaking learned. Excuse me? Did he not get in trouble? I mean, this kid made a bomb. I know we go pretty easy on children, but I think we should probably keep our eye on some. Not me, but 3 kids went up a hill near where I lived and decided to play with fire. They ended up burning down 40 houses, including mine. Most of the houses were leveled to the ground with nothing left but ashes. The evacuation was quick and many people lost pets and dozens of cars, and other vehicles that were also torched. My neighbors were about 12 Mexicans living in one house and they didn't believe in banks and lost all of their money, about $7,000. That was in a jar in their basement. It wasn't a rich neighborhood, but many people didn't have insurance, so people became homeless. The kids in question came from a rich neighborhood and from which I hear had no remorse whatsoever. Neither them nor their parents had to pay a single penny. Kids didn't even get a slap on the wrist from what I heard. I was just a kid and my family had to live in a car for a few days before the Red Cross came and helped us with the motel for a couple of months before we could find another place to live. It wasn't a huge town, and with 40 families looking for a place to live, it took a while to find a place. If you're ever looking to give money, the Red Cross is always a good place to give. That and community action. Rich spoiled kids not having any remorse for people that make less money than their families? Color me shocked. I almost choked a family friend to death when I was a kid. We were playing around, wrestling and roughhousing, and I locked my arms around his neck pretending to put him in a sleeper hold. I thought he was just acting when he went all limp, so I just kept clinging on his back with my arm across his throat. I had no idea that I actually choked him unconscious. Only my mom freaking the freak out alerted me to the fact that no, he wasn't pretending, and yes, he was unconscious. I'm sure he lost a few brain cells because of me. And people say wrestling is fake. A friend and I accidentally set a park on fire, which spread to an elementary school and a forest. We were too freaked out to call 911 and ended up doing a tremendous amount of damage. A colleague pushed out the wrong image update to every desktop and computer at Merrill Lynch, taking every single one out for the span of 2 to 3 days. He was fired and sued. I think the company's insurance policy was hit really hard. Conversely, one day while I was at uni, I was wasted and on a midnight snack run to the 24/7 BP service station down the road. I was wandering past a playground and noticed some flickering light in the bank underneath the play equipment. I ran over to take a look, and there were these lines of fire all throughout the park, like somebody had sprayed a kind of accelerant so that it covered a fair amount of it and then lit. I ran around and kicked the dirt all over the fire and put it out, preventing what could have been a tremendous amount of damage. In retrospect, I probably should have called the fire department afterwards in case there was something smoldering, but I was pretty wasted and paranoid. When I was a kid, I went to my cousin's house one weekend. We were playing outside when a neighborhood kid approached us, telling us that the trailer park in the adjacent property was being thrown away by the owners and that we could do whatever we wanted to. After realizing that it was locked, we proceeded to find whatever we could, hammers, crowbars, etc., to smash the locks and get inside. After multiple futile attempts to smash the locks, we started trying to find our way in by ripping giant holes in the door. We ended up screwing this trailer up pretty badly before my aunt came outside in a storming rage and stopped us. After being caught and questioned, the kid that convinced us to do it claimed that he was only doing what he was told and that he had no idea what was going on. It was his parents' trailer. This story unlocked a memory of mine. I was at a friend's house and we were trying to play soccer. Well, he was the goalie and I was trying to score. Well, turns out he wasn't a very good goalie because I probably kicked the best soccer kick of my life and it went directly into his back door, leaving a huge dent in one of the panels. I feared for my life after that, and it was safe to say that any dreams of becoming a soccer star were crushed that day. A friend of mine lived across the street from a courthouse. One night we went on the roof and started launching bananas at the courthouse with a water balloon launcher. They were all landing on the courthouse steps. Then, the most glorious shot I've ever seen. It started out as a normal shot, but it was at the halfway mark, the banana hit an updraft or something, but instead of going down, it went up. And when I say up, I mean up to the glass dome. High velocity bananas plus glass domes don't mix. The banana shattered a glass panel of the dome. All those years of shenanigans, that was the greatest. Back when I was a dumb kid living in Italy, a bunch of friends and I decided to play hide and go seek inside one of the empty villas in our parco. Since the front door was locked and there were bars on the windows, we decided to break a hole in the side of the wall. Once inside, we discovered that laborers who worked for the landlord kept their power tools in there. We went full crazy and completely destroyed everything in that house. One of us came up with the idea if we hit a big water tank outside with the pickaxe, it would explode. After being disappointed by cracking the tank in half with no explosion, we decided the only way we could cause an explosion was to pour gasoline all over the furnace. Before we had a chance to throw the sparkling stick at it, the SPs and Carabinieri showed up to ruin our fun. That's it for this video. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Link at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. It's linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.